£1 million. But the vast amounts of cash lining the top dog's pockets isn't the norm in a typical fight.
Let's say you're lucky and you get between 5 and 10 grand. You're going to get 10 grand max for that. 10% goes to the trainer, 25% goes to the manager. Then we've got the tax man to pay as well. So we're cutting that money in at least half. So now you've got 5 grand for a 10-week camp. So you're talking about a guy here earning, he might be clearing 500 quid a week. How do you support a family on that? So boxers chase the dream. And, you know, there's probably 2% of them that actually make it.
So say you do make it and you start to rise up the ranks. Strikers Boxing, a training academy, says the mid-tier fighters can earn more, somewhere between £10,000 and £50,000 a fight, depending on record, profile, opponent and popularity of weight class. It's only at the top level does the real cash start flowing in, with the top-tier professionals, i.e. those going for titles, earning 6 figures a fight. Something else you'll have heard of is the terms prize fighter or journeyman. A prize fighter is, as it sounds, someone who picks up fights where they can and gets a nice big check if they win. Journeymen are the fighters who take on up-and-comers, effectively used for experience in the ring. Even if they're going up against the real prospects, a young Anthony Joshua, for example, these guys will be lucky to earn more than 10 grand. So the average boxer isn't as rich as you'd think.
You're listening to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express. I'm Kevin Hatchard, deputising for the great man tonight. And with me is the Odysseus to my Eurylochus, the European football titan that is Andy Brassel. So much to get through in the next 3 hours. Will this be Cristiano Ronaldo's final season? That's certainly what he's hinting at. Scotland have a new manager. We'll give you the lowdown on Sebastian Pocognoli. The season has begun in La Liga, although it didn't include either Real Madrid or Barcelona. And can anyone stop PSG? The Trans-Europe Express has left the station, and you're all very welcome. Andy, wonderful to have you with us once again. Have you seen the Odyssey yet?
No, I've not, but it's on the list just after the new Spider-Man.
Okay, oh, so that's where the priorities are, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Spider-Man first, Odyssey next. Fair enough, fair enough. What did amuse me, actually, is people have been on social media begging people not to give them spoilers about the Odyssey, even though it's one of the oldest stories of all time. But there we go. Moving on.
I'm going to spoil Beowulf for you later on the show.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You'll do the Iliad next. We talked about PSG. Just mentioned them there at the top. They're in action, Andy, against Lens in the Trophée de Champion, which is the traditional curtain raiser, but the French tend to muck around with it a bit, don't they? Move it around the schedule. But PSG facing Lens in that curtain raiser, and PSG not having things all their own way.
Yeah, traditionally, it's in France, and it's at the Stadium of Lens, the Bollard, which is interesting. Lens have made the most of that home advantage. Coming up to the hour mark, they're 1-0 up. Florian Thauvin scoring the goal in the first half, but Lens are down to 10 after young defender Kylian Antonio was sent off for, well, what wasn't even really a foul on Magnus Akliush. But nevertheless, they're down to 10. So all backs against the wall for them.
So we start with what is potentially a huge story. Our poll is going to be relevant to this. I'll give you that in a little while. But Cristiano Ronaldo has told Vogue, and me and Andy are still waiting for our pieces with Vogue. They haven't happened just yet. But he's told Vogue that this could be the final season of his playing career. This is what he said. It's probably my last year of football, and I want to leave a spectacular legacy. I have my future all mapped out. I have so many things to keep me busy that to tell you just one thing is hard. Football could leave a big hole, so you have to fill your time in various ways. I'll have more fun. I'll travel more. I'll watch. I'll play paddle, which I really enjoy, and I'll enjoy what I've earned. And then he corrected it and said what we've earned, because his new wife was alongside him in the interview. So even though he's Cristiano Ronaldo, he still knows he might be in trouble with the missus if he's not careful. Andy, this was intriguing. I'm not 100% convinced by this, because if he ends up 3 goals short of reaching 1,000, there's no way he's going to stop 3 short of 1,000, surely.
No, but that's the thing. He's not that far away at the moment. And he said, this will probably be my last year of football. So does that mean year or season? You know, it's quite open-ended, really, isn't it? So there's the possibility that he could pack it in time for Christmas. And then maybe he's still at it in December 2027 because, you know, he's trying to get over the line with some sort of record. I think it's a fair response to obviously something that people have been asking for a long time. I don't think it's any sort of reaction to Ange Postecoglou going, "Congratulations, mate," on the news of his marriage in the week in that Al Nassr training session. But look, we've known this is probably coming for a while. But obviously, a lot of people have thought, well, he's been going on and on and on and on for Portugal. So will he be going for the next World Cup? When, of course, some of the World Cup will be in Portugal, you know. Will he still be going for the Euros, which is before that? And of course, Jorge Jesus, the new Portugal coach, was very non-committal, saying it would be up to Ronaldo himself to choose when he was moving on. But I think it's clear to everyone, whether they're someone who admires him enormously and is a super fan or isn't at all, that the time is coming. And I think rather than make a big announcement of it, to sort of sneak the news out there, to let people get used to it, and then sort of have his, I guess, Kobe-style farewell tour seems like the most logical option. Of course, it was suggested by a number of sources going back a couple of weeks that when they play on the 24th of September at home against Norway, that would be his send-off in Portugal with the national team. Now, look, we've got no confirmation of that. There's the whole Nations League to go. And maybe the Nations League is something, you know, that Portugal have taken a lot more seriously than other nations. Maybe that will be the send-off in his international football terms.
If he does go, obviously it's a big question for now, and I'm sure on the show, you know, you'll talk about it when he eventually does go at length. But it's been a really intriguing career. It's been an extraordinary body of work. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But the kind of, you know, wave of his career, if you like, the way that it's gone, he's at Al Nassr now, and I know he's spoken very highly about Saudi Arabian football, and you would do on those wages. But it's been a strange trajectory in the last few years, I would say, at club level. Is that fair to say?
It has. But I think we have to say as well that he started really young. He achieved pretty much everything that he wanted to achieve anyway. I think, like, by the time he was 35, so, you know, 6 or 7 years ago, really. So, he's just been pleasing himself rather than playing as if he has something to prove. Now, look, I think obviously the thing is the World Cup, and that is a thing particularly because of what happened in the summer, because a very talented Portugal generation have fallen really short on not just on this tournament, but on the last couple of tournaments. And because, of course, he's always framed in terms of Ronaldo, Messi, and Messi won the World Cup in 2022. Now, I can't get at all with the argument that Doha in December 2022 was the moment where Messi put an end to the argument over Messi or Ronaldo. And no one sensible was asking that anyway, really, were they? You know, I think it's clear that there's a before 2014 World Cup and an after 2014 World Cup, when he went to that with Portugal when he was injured. He shouldn't have. He said it himself in the documentary about his life the year after, that came out in November 2015. And I think really that is the join between, there are lots of pivotal points in his career. So where he changes from being a winger to a centre forward, where really the bit that really changes him is the first spell at Manchester United, where he goes from being built like a pipe cleaner and a very aesthetically pleasing winger to becoming this sort of ultra marathon runner who can win everything in the air and scores goals. But really, I think you look at after 2014, it sort of accelerates his change into a purely penalty box player and nothing else. And it's a strange thing to talk about, really, isn't it? Because I think it's easy to look at Ronaldo as someone pre and post 2016 and the Euros with Portugal. It's easy to look at him at him as pre and post Real Madrid even. But really, I think despite looking at his 30s and the fact that he scored over half his nearly 1,000 goals in that spell since he turned 30, I think you have to really focus on how he's developed and changed as a player in that time. And what he's done on his terms, the way he's extended his career on his terms, has been extraordinary. And yeah, I think now we will be able to finally put him in the place in the football pantheon where he belongs. Very, very near the top, but not quite at the summit.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you look at the effort that he's put in, if you look at all those hard yards, if you look at the longevity, it is a truly extraordinary body of work. Because as you say, I mean, I wonder at the moment about some of the young guys that have come through. If you think of guys like Vietz and Bellingham, Vinicius Jr., when you think of how young he was when he broke through, and you wonder, are these guys going to even manage to get to their mid-30s? Because they play so much football and so much consequential football, and they have so much pressure from a young age. I suppose the only way to do it is exactly what you've just described, actually, which is to reinvent yourself and tailor your game to what your body is telling you. And he's probably done that better than anyone, hasn't he?
Of course, the reality is Messi has done that as well in the last decade. I think since 2013, when you can see his body really breaking down when Barcelona are absolutely hammered in the Champions League by Bayern Munich. And then you look at Barcelona, what they do, and they go out and they get prime Luis Suarez, they get Neymar to do his running for him, and it changes the way that Messi plays, and it extends Messi's career, because we can't forget the fact that he's nearly 40 as well. He's just turned 39 in this World Cup. And I guess if Ronaldo doesn't seem like a regrets guy to me, and he shouldn't be. He's achieved everything he must have wanted to achieve apart from the World Cup, and like so much more. No one has the right to expect of their career what he's been able to achieve. And, it is about an extraordinary level of work that he's put in. But I think if you look at, as you say, that change, that metamorphosis over the last decade of both of those big players, I think if there is something he might feel slight sadness about Ronaldo, it's Barcelona originally, before they kicked him to the curb, of course, and Argentina have legislated for that change in him better, that they've developed the way they play around him better. I'm talking about the prime Barcelona years, and really that sort of 2015 team under Luis Enrique that won the Champions League against Juventus. And, there's been a lot of talk. And there was a lot of talk in Barcelona, especially as things started to go wrong financially, especially post 2015, about are Barcelona wasting the rest of Messi's prime? Well, I think a more relevant question is, actually, have Ronaldo's clubs wasted, and Portugal wasted, the last part of his career? Look, I know it's always looked at it because of the way we look at Ronaldo as this preening prima donna. Everything's talked about through his sense of will. And of course, we know everything he's put in to make his career what it is. But I think as well that everything that's been around him has to take some responsibility as well. He's been enabled to become this millstone to the Portuguese national team, which is really sad because when there's a bit of distance from it, when he finally has retired, 2 years down the line, I think people will look at his career very differently because we won't be thinking about the World Cup this summer or the World Cup in 2022. We'll be thinking about the entire body of work.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you look at Juventus, for example, they bet the farm on him getting them the Champions League. And they actually ended up further away from the Champions League when he finished than when he'd started. Now, that's not entirely down to him. His numbers are very good, but the overall project didn't work. So they have to carry the can for a lot of that as well as him. And Manchester United, the second time around, it's quite complicated because he has this bust up with Erik ten Hag. His behaviour is not great, but the club isn't set up to succeed. So I think you're absolutely right. I think he will reflect possibly on things he did wrong. But I think with Portugal as well, you're spot on because Roberto Martinez had a choice to make because Fernando Santos had done the hard work by dropping Ronaldo for Gonzalo Ramos, hadn't he, at a major tournament? And Ramos had got the hat-trick in that 6-1 win over Switzerland. But instead, Martinez, hitched the wagon to Ronaldo and took them both down in the end. So, yeah, very, very intriguing. I'm still not 100% convinced he's going to stop. I just think he's going to keep on going, but we will see. Our poll is very relevant to this. For which team did Cristiano Ronaldo play his best football? Manchester United, Real Madrid, Portugal, or someone else? You can get in touch on text 81089, or you can get in touch via our various social media channels. Just one line to reiterate. You may have heard it in the news at the top of the hour, but talkSPORT understands that Manchester City have agreed a deal with Barcelona around about £65 million for the transfer of Rodri. We are going to talk about that in detail later in the hour when we talk La Liga, but it looks as though Rodri is going to make the move to Barcelona from Manchester City. But coming up after the break on Trans Europe Express, we're going to talk about Scotland's new manager.
What, €1 for one Prem?
Yeah, all right. Yeah,
Two.
Obviously.
You're swapping two, Jay. You are.
Don't know.
Jay, you are.
Maybe two. Don't know, though. Like, them nights as a final, you come on, you've been in cup finals. Them nights, you never give them
Jay,
up.
I've been two. And do you know what? I don't want to bring it up, yeah? You cost me one of them.
What do you mean I cost you one of them?
You missed the pen. So
Hold on. Wait, hold on. I didn't see you taking one.
I said to Harry, I'll take one.
No.
You do five.
No. Let's have this out. Don't
Yeah.
be blaming me for your Carabao Cup loss, all right? Because I took the first pen and Darren Bent was nowhere to be seen.
And I'm going to tell you the exact truth of what happened.
No,
At
go
the
on.
time, I was a penalty taker. I said to Harry, I'll take one. He said, no, you take five. I went,
No, Robin
Sure.
King took 5.
no, I was supposed to take five.
Right.
And he said, you took one. So it never got to me. I never got to take one.
Yeah, but the 5th penalty on that night was Robbie Keane.
No, it's me.
Nah, you're lying.
Ask Keno. I don't know if you can remember, but
Nah, you're lying.
I was 5.
You're lying.
I was a penalty taker at the time. So
So why don't you take one?
because I said to Harry, he said, no, 5.
Nah, I disagree, mate. I think you bottled it.
Hey, listen. Hey, have you seen the pen, Bill?
I did not cost you a Carabao Cup.
You did, mate.
Where were you in the 90 mins?
That could have been 2, mate. That could have been 2 for me. That, but no. Cheers, Jake.
That still haunts me, that does.
Does it?
Yeah, it hurts my feelings. I think about it a lot.
Ben Frost had the game of his life, mate.
Yeah.
He won man of the match.
Welcome back to Trans Europe Express. More breaking news today. Scotland have a new manager. Sebastian Pocognoli is going to be the replacement for Steve Clarke. Now, you might remember Pocognoli as a left-back for Brighton and West Brom. He played international football for Belgium as well as a coach. An extraordinary achievement when he led Union Saint-Gilloise to their first Belgian title for 90 years. But last season, he had something of an underwhelming spell as the coach of Monaco. Andy, Scotland have done this before. Of course, Bertie Vogts was in charge at one stage, the legendary German defender turned coach. This is quite an interesting choice, I think. I mean, it could be seen as quite progressive. Pocagnoli's done some great stuff. He's a young guy with some interesting ideas. But how do we assess his time at Monaco last season? Because I wasn't sure getting rid of Adi Hütter was the right thing to do in the first place. Pocagnoli didn't really manage to turn their season round.
Yeah, I mean, if you weren't sure whether getting rid of Adi Hütter was the right plan, taking the Monaco job definitely wasn't the right plan for Pocagnoli. He would have been smarter, I think, to stay at Union, where he had a lot of credit in the bank. Of course, he had a relationship with the club as well. He finished his playing career there. He was in charge of the under-21s before he took the top job and won the league in his first season. And to take them into the Champions League, I think, no one's expecting anything. He gets the time to continue and develop. But it was almost an Andre Villas-Boas-esque move, really, wasn't it, when he left Porto for Chelsea? Everyone knew it was too soon, but he went and did it anyway. And sometimes your ego just won't take no for an answer, I think. Obviously, there was a financial incentive to that as well, going to Monaco. But there was a spell last season where Monaco played really well and they looked as if they could turn it around sort of between mid-January and March. But so much there was all over the place. You can't blame it all on him. I think he was coming into a very difficult situation and it's basically turn it around or get fired, really, despite the fact he was given a contract beyond the end of the season. So I think there's so much that we can't know about Pocagnoli as a coach because, you're talking about 2 seasons, really, in charge of a senior first team. And they're 2 seasons in which a lot's happened. So we can kind of have the impression, I'm glad you brought up his age, actually, there, Kev. You can have the impression that he's been going for longer than he actually has. But actually, he's just lived several lifetimes in the last 2 seasons.
He's crammed it all in.
He has. I guess what I would feel positive about is the onus at both of those teams, at both of those clubs, Union Saint-Gilloise and Monaco, obviously at very different levels, is to develop players. And Scotland have got a lot of talent that could do with being developed at the moment.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Because that's the vibe that you get, that's what the SFA want. They want somebody that can bring through this generation of Scottish players. But the truth is, he's got a pretty high bar to reach because I know that Steve Clarke got a lot of stick for Scotland's performances in tournament football. I can understand that. The World Cup was...
But he got them there.
Yeah, but he got them there. This is the thing, isn't it? So, obviously, with the World Cup, they beat Haiti, but they do it in a very nervous, narrow way, and ultimately that costs them, and they make errors against Brazil, but that's not Clarke's fault because he can't get on the pitch and bring the ball out in defence for them. You look at the Euros, and there was some really disappointing performances in there as well. They were hammered by Germany. They were really awful in the final group game against Hungary. But ultimately, you're right. If you zoom out a bit further from that, he qualified them time and time again for major tournaments in a way that no other Scotland coach had been able to do. They hadn't been able to find that level of consistency. And he had coached more Scotland games than anyone in the nation's history. So it's quite a high bar to reach, isn't it?
It is. But I guess if you frame it like that, Kev, it's like talking about the job that he inherited at Union Saint-Gilloise, because that could have easily gone horribly wrong. He was taking over a club where they get promoted for the first time in 50 years and they're in the title mix straight away. And not just one season, every season until he takes over, despite the fact they're losing players along the way. So for him to even follow up and compete as such a young coach, as such an inexperienced coach, would have been really something. And by the way, you could put together a huge list of Union Saint-Gilloise players that they lost in the years before he took over, and including the summer that he took over, and think, how are they going to get by without these guys? They're absolutely irreplaceable, especially for a club of that sort of level. And really, without reinventing the wheel, which I guess is the important thing in terms of Scotland. You know, there are things they could improve on, but they don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. As you say, consistently qualifying for tournaments is the first bit. So in that sense, it's quite similar to the job he did at Union Saint-Gilloise. He'll be asked to take over, continue the positive trajectory, and just take them up that little level from there. And of course, he'll have the advantage of players not being sold from under him.
Just finally on this, I'm sure there's going to be a call for him to have Scottish assistants or some kind of Scottish input into the coaching. How important do you think that's going to be? Because I'm sure there'll be quarters of Scottish football that say, well, we should have had a Scottish coach. You know, there's no need for us to bring somebody in from outside Scotland, especially somebody with such a short, but as you say, packed CV, even though, you know, a short number of seasons at the helm. How important do you think that is? Or do you think that's a bit... Because I always wonder, people talk about, oh, managers coming into the Premier League, they've got to have Premier League experience. Well, there's a lot of coaches that didn't have that and still did very, very well.
Yeah, and I think especially in international coaching is something completely different, isn't it? You know, it's everyone knows international football. But I think what we've seen in recent times is international coaching is a very, very different job. Now, look, his experience working with the Belgium age groups is really important when it comes to this. When we talked about development and development at international level, like forget the Union Saint-Gilloise and Monaco stuff for a minute. This is a guy who understands what it is to help players grow up at international level, which I think is really important. It's a real get, I feel, for Scotland, even if there is some risk and even if there are some unknowns. I didn't imagine them getting a name as big as this, if I'm being completely honest. And I think the other thing with Scotland, even if there is some really interesting talent coming through, I think at the very top of the game, there's not a glut of amazing coaches. A little bit like the Netherlands, if you like. It feels like the talent is maybe more headlining than the coaches at the moment. So look, I think in terms of like the Scottish League not being shown all over the world, I do feel that having a little bit of Scottish blood on the coaching staff is probably going to be helpful to him, but he's smart. He's going to know that, right?
Andy Brassel, the pro that he is, dropping the little Dutch breadcrumb trail there for us to lead us to the fact that Xavi has been named as the new coach of the Netherlands. I really like this, I have to say. I think you listen to the way he spoke and talked about his link with Johan Cruyff, who worked with Barcelona, Rinus Michels, who are two absolute giants of Dutch football coaching history. And there are links there. You know, there's no doubt about that. There was a really strong Dutch influence at Barcelona when he was there. He worked with Frank Rijkaard. He's talked about that. And I get the sense Xavi's going to want to play the kind of football that Dutch fans will want to see.
Yeah, and in terms of an intro, as you say, Kev, if we're talking about an under 6 foot man stepping up to the plate and making a big impression, this was Jose Altuve for the Houston Astros getting out there with the bat in his hand, wasn't it? It was really interesting. And I think especially because the Netherlands are very aware that they have their own very distinct football culture, for him to get in there and say, well, you know, I know Barcelona, therefore I know Dutch football. It's all about the lineage. I think it was a very smart way to frame it. It might be obvious to some. I think people will have been excited about him anyway. But I think to underline that, to make it explicit is very important. Now, the other thing we have to say is that Dutch football and the people around Dutch football have a very firm idea of how it should be played. The Netherlands aren't going to be super exciting in the next little while. We should point that out because Xavi is actually quite a conservative coach.
Yeah.
He's someone who thinks very deeply about the game and believes very strongly in the principles of Barcelona. But to have someone who has that, but is quite practical as well, I think that's maybe quite useful to them. And especially when you bear in mind the amount of good defensive players they've got, I think to have someone who is sort of pragmatic, I think is probably quite helpful to them. So on one hand, you can sell him as this glamour appointment. On the other hand, it's actually something that suits really well what they have at the moment.
Just one more on him, actually, because when he was at Barcelona, it struck me that he looked really, really wrung out by the end. We know that he'd had a falling out with Laporta and Deco, and it all ended very badly. But even before that, it seemed to me that the constant politics at Barcelona really weighed heavily on him and upset him at times, I think. Just the pressure of that job. And with international football, look, the Dutch job is a big one. There's no doubt about it. It comes with scrutiny. It comes with pressure. But I just feel like this is going to suit him as a guy a lot more than Barcelona did.
Yeah, I would agree with that totally. I think it will really suit him, and it was difficult to see where he was going to go next. But what we have to say is that he took Barcelona at a very low ebb, and I think people forget that. A lower ebb than, again, people say, Pep Guardiola's lived his life his footballing life with a silver spoon in his mouth, and they completely forget the state that he inherited Barcelona in 2008. But that was even more so for Xavi, and the lift that he gave the place. I went there for, I think it was his first or his second home game when they played Benfica in the Champions League. And Camp Nou had about 30,000 in it. It was pouring down with rain. But that atmosphere that he created, because he's got such personality, because players and fans really respond to him, I think that's super important. And as you say, he can step away and take a deep breath at the moments that matter. I mean, you could say, we could be talking about Jurgen Klopp here, really, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could. I think you're absolutely right. I think current Barcelona under Hansi Flick can't happen without previous Barcelona under Xavi. I think he did a wonderful job in very difficult circumstances. We're going to talk a bit more about Barcelona and La Liga after the break, because it looks as though Rodri is on his way to Catalonia.
Who's winning the title?
Don't know. I don't know. I want to know what you think of this, because I haven't got a clue. I really haven't. I think it's one of the most hardest calls to make we've had in recent years.
The thing is about Manchester City, I wonder without Pep how different it'll be.
Yeah, and if they lose Rodri.
Exactly. You wonder what it's going to be like, but then you never write them off. Arsenal, I think, look like the most complete team.
Gabriel injured, though, for 5 months.
For 5 months.
And Trossard going out. I don't like the Trossard sale. I really don't. I think he's such a big, influential player for them. I can't believe they've sold him.
I know. But then Guimaraes came on in.
Big signing. Like him a lot.
But then I also look at Manchester United and I wonder, but Chelsea, I think, Jason's right. I don't think we should be sleeping on it at all.
No. We could have a 5 or 6 horse race this season. Yeah. That would be incredible. It really would. I don't want to see somebody run away with it.
Go on then, though. But Jason looked down the camera and delivered that it will be Chelsea.
I know.
So who is it then? Put your neck on the line.
I'm going to say Man United. I do. I think Man United. I think the last season's form has set into motion a style of play and an expectation of what them players have to deliver week in, week out for Manchester.
talkSPORT Breakfast returns tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. as Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoist are joined by a host of guests as they discuss all of the biggest stories from the weekend, including Arsenal's dominant victory over Manchester City in the Community Shield. That's talkSPORT Breakfast from 6 a.m. tomorrow with Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoist. You will not want to miss it. Right, time to talk La Liga, and we're going to start with some of the big news that is breaking, because talkSPORT understands that a deal has now been reached between Barcelona and Manchester City for the transfer of Rodri, a deal worth around about £65 million. And Andy, this is fascinating, because we talked about the kind of benefits for Barcelona before on the show, but obviously this brings it into even sharper focus. And the irony is that, of course, Manchester City haven't quite sorted out their midfield. There's talk of Ayoub Bouadi going there, and it looks as though that's probably on the cards. Elliot Anderson already there. But Enzo Maresca, whichever configuration he's got, if he doesn't have Rodri, he's got a fair bit of sorting out to do early on.
It's fair to say. By the way, I just have to update you from the Trophée des Champions. It is still 1-0 to Lens. We're going into the closing minutes. It's now 10 aside. Bruno Mensch has been sent off for elbowing Skoras on the halfway line. So we'll see if that translates into a domestic suspension. But obviously, it has a particular status in the calendar, like the Community Shield that happened today. And Lens have very controversially had a second goal ruled out after the referee didn't play the advantage after a foul in the build-up, and Lens scored, but it has been chalked off, which is not ideal for them. But yes, to go back to Rodri, I think it is the right move, as I've said before, for Barcelona, for Rodri, and for Manchester City. But sooner or later, they're going to have to replace him. And it might as well be now, while they can get some money for him. Obviously, the results when he plays and when he doesn't are very different. That was the same under Pep Guardiola than it was under as it has been so far, in a sample of one game under Enzo Maresca. But they're going to have to figure out a way to move on. And they've needed to do that for a while, actually, because, as I've said before, I think the fact that he was excellent, especially in the closing stages of the World Cup, shouldn't make us forget the physical struggles that he's had since he's come back from that ACL. And I think there has to be a real question, can he last a full Premier League season anymore? Like, basically, it will extend his career by going and playing La Liga instead. So we can talk about it being like his preferred option from a personal level. I'm sure he's not unaware of that. The fact that he doesn't want to be in his 30s trying to get back to the point where he can dominate for Manchester City in 35 out of 38 games a season. I think that's a really hard ask. So I think they've done the right thing as well. What I think is interesting is the discussion in Barcelona, Kev, that we assume because they're getting a past and who knows, maybe future Ballon d'Or, something maybe we'll discuss later in the show, that this is a slam dunk for everyone all round. But there are definitely people in Barcelona and journalists who follow the club who think, is this the right move? Because they're spending a lot of money, because we know they've got a little bit more latitude at the moment, but, you know, we're not that far off them starting the La Liga campaign, and they're not able to register Anthony Gordon yet. They've still got to do a bit of shifting, and there they are spending another 75 million euros on a player if all those bonuses are realised. And, you know, you look at the fact that they've got Marc Barral to come back, and they've got Marc Casado as well, who they're thinking of selling to the Saudi Pro League, which obviously a lot of people are quite upset about. So I think despite the fact he's a brilliant player, there are people out there in Barcelona really wondering, are the club repeating past mistakes?
Yeah, because this has been accelerated, hasn't it, by the injury to Frenkie de Jong.
Yes.
Marc Barral, who you've mentioned, there's a lot of people at Barcelona, including Hansi Flick, who rate him very, very highly. But he's had his own injury problems as well. He was out for a long time, wasn't he, with a serious injury. I guess I can completely understand the trepidation around it, but I suppose if, as you've said, Barcelona have more latitude now than they've had for quite some time, and it might be more latitude than they have in the future if they have to stick a roof on Camp Nou and they have to move away from there again. So it might be the time now to bring a guy in who can maybe only give you 2 more, 3 more years at the top level, but that might be enough. And I just think with the way that Hansi Flick plays, you do need that guy fighting fires at the other end of the pitch, because if you press so high, if you take so many risks, you need that guy who's going to help sweep up, I guess. Not the only...
Kev, the time is always the right time if you're Joan Laporta.
Oh, well, exactly.
That is his thing, isn't it?
He's a short-term guy.
Yeah, totally. And he is all about keeping it moving, keeping the stars in, keeping Barcelona relevant. And, you know, he's not going to change it at this point. So love it or loathe it, it's not a surprise.
Yeah, Barcelona not involved in the La Liga start. Real Madrid not involved in the La Liga start as well, Andy. Just tell us why that is. Those two not playing, Atletico Madrid not involved either. Just tell us why La Liga started without them this weekend.
Well, I gave them a bell and said, I'm really looking forward to the first day relegation scrap between Sevilla and Rayo Vallecano, so please clear the decks for that. Apart from that, though, all the teams were given an option if they had players in the last 4 or beyond of the World Cup to postpone their games from the opening weekend and play them at a later date. And so Atletico, Real Madrid and Barcelona all took them up on that. Celta Vigo did not.
Yes, Celta Vigo were going to play, but for a very unusual reason, Andy. They were not in action this weekend.
Yeah, so look, everything's been kicked down the road at the moment. And I think if we look at this opening to the La Liga weekend, it's a bit strange, really, because it's almost like a soft launch for the competition, isn't it? I mean, it's great for us because we get to look at other more niche stories, as you say. But in a league that's trying to like make itself like an increasing global presence, it's quite a decision to do this rather than put the whole league back for a week.
Yeah, it's very ropey that you have a start to a season where Celta Vigo wanted to play their opening game but couldn't because of a fungal outbreak at their pitch, so they weren't able to play the game. They were desperate to play against Osasuna and couldn't because of the pitch. Rayo Vallecano,
yearly occurrence in France.
Rayo Vallecano can't play at home at all now this season. They've been kicked out of Vallecas because there was a health and safety report, and one of the recommendations on there suggested that fans could get Legionnaire's disease if Rayo played at home because of the refuse and all of the various things that have built up around the stadium. We've talked before, haven't we, Andy, about there not being hot water in the showers for the players. We've talked about the pitch being out of action, not only at the ground, but at the training ground. So a bit of a mess there. They're going to have to play miles and miles away at Leganes' ground. So that's a mess for them. But there was some football, and you've given us a headline for the section, Andy, which is "You're going to be a star." What's that all about?
Yeah, that's right. We were talking about Scottish football before, and one who'll be hoping to get in the squad is Robbie Ure, who's been scoring a lot of goals in Sweden for Sirius, the surprise league leaders, the Rangers youth product. He was sold to Sevilla this week. And obviously the Sevilla socials have spent all week talking about the Scottish connections that the club has. And he made a massive impression on debut. So they go 1-0 down after 3 minutes after a bad error from one of the other debutants, Aruna Sangante, who I'm a big fan of actually, but didn't cover himself in glory for that Alvaro Garcia opener. And then Robbie Ure comes on at half-time, really puts himself about and really gets the crowd on side. 2 penalties win it for them. And Robbie Ure won the second one. And when I say won the second one, I mean won the second one that was put away by Peque Fernandez, and a lot of controversy surrounding that is fair to say, and certainly that VAR didn't pick up on that and ask the referee to reconsider.
He's only been in La Liga 2 minutes, as he may be picking up a few tricks of the trade already from Spain. It could be, we just don't know how it's going to turn out at Sevilla. It's been a strange old couple of seasons for them, fighting against relegation. They've lost a fair few top players. Acor Adams has gone. Obviously, Alexis Sanchez, 906 years old. He's moved on as well. He's in MLS now, so it'll be fascinating to see how their season plays out. Before we get to our stars of the week, Andy, I should just mention, actually, it was remiss of me not to mention it earlier. Christian Romero has made possibly the most obvious transfer in world football because he's gone to Atletico Madrid. You couldn't get a better fit, could you, for a Diego Simeone team than him? He's made the move from Spurs to Atleti.
Not a better fit at a better time, I think it's fair to say, because, of course, something that's been talked a lot about in Spain in the days leading up to that transfer being completed is the fact that Julian Alvarez, who has been reported, has actually put his transfer request on the back burner. I don't know if the idea was, it's been suggested that Cuti Romero is a transfer to make him happy. Of course, there's a lot of chat at the moment, and certainly some disquiet amongst some sections of the Atletico support about this increasing Argentinian clique. Yes, I know Diego Simeone's been there for going on 15 years, but is growing. If you look at the big players in the squad. If you look at Alvarez, if you look at Romero arriving now, Giuliano Simeone, of course. So many big Argentinian personalities, despite the sale of Thiago Almada back to Argentina. But I just wonder, Romero, I can't imagine him like sort of, buying Julian Alvarez a box of milk tray and going, please, will you continue to be mine? I imagine something a little bit more route one, perhaps. But I don't know. I think the pitch from Simeone must have been like, think of Diego Costa. You're my defensive Diego Costa. I don't want to tame you. I just want you to be yourself, really, in this situation. But I think he'd just become, even though in some ways he's a very iconic player for Tottenham, I know he's been a massive favourite of Danny's down the years. The fact is, there's no way Atletico could have made this deal happen if we go back a year. He was simply too expensive and they couldn't do it. But he's just become such a pain in the backside for Tottenham.
Yeah.
That they just basically had to get his contract off the books, and that made him gettable, and that made it a doable deal for Atletico Madrid.
My star of the week for La Liga is going to be 19-year-old Sergio Martinez, who scored an absolute cracker for Racing Santander, lasered it into the net against Villarreal from the edge of the box. That gave them a 2-0 lead at home to Villarreal, their first La Liga game for 14 years, but they couldn't quite hold on, drew 2-2 with the Yellow Submarine, but played very well. Andy, who's yours?
Mine is former Blackburn winger Tyrese Dolan, who scored a brilliant goal, actually, for Espanyol in the 3-0 win over Levante. By the way, Mauricio Pochettino was in the crowd there this afternoon to see his former club, the US national team coach. But Dolan ended last season better than he'd started it after an initial settling in period. And he's looking buff as well. He's clearly been working out this summer. For second-year Tyrese Dolan, think second-year Gareth Bale at Real Madrid, I'd say.
An example there of game recognises game. Coming up after the break, we're going to take a look at Mbappe Watch. Honestly, I've seen a few messages today and you go, yeah, that O'Hara and Gabby, they're talking rubbish, need to get rid of them. Rory talks sense. I'm like, having a laugh.
Yeah, that was me. That was me saying that. Yeah. I've been commenting. I've been, God, those two have been terrible. Look at those two giggling away.
Brennan Johnson, listen, fair play to him. He had a little bite. And that's fine. Got no problem with a player having a bite back because it's all part and parcel of working in the media, being a footballer. You're going to take criticism. He obviously didn't like the fact we said it was crap for crap. What he didn't realise, and I'm sure...
That's weird of him, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously he's not going to like that. But, it was only a bit of a laugh. But, I get it. People are going to... You get the ump with things. I've been called crap plenty of times. Get called crap every single day of the week. Don't take it personal. All right? It is what it is. He has been crap.
Yeah, I think that's
like,
the point.
I'm sorry, but, I'm not saying he's a bad player. Anyone who plays Premier League football, anyone who does what he's done, fair play. Brilliant. Last season, Brennan Johnson was crap.
Yeah.
He would be the first to admit it. And hopefully he goes to Everton and he does all right. And Dwight McNeil goes the other way. I like Dwight McNeil. I think he's a good player. His stats, is what we were talking about on the show, me and Gabby, were crap.
Yeah.
So there's no apology needed. I know Gabby bottled it. Welcome back to Trans Europe Express. Just a line from the transfer journalist David Ornstein. Very interesting one, this. He's saying that Emi Martinez's potential move from Aston Villa to Juventus is off. He said that personal terms were no issue, but Juve are not proceeding with the deal. Now, of course, Villa have already moved to sign a promising young goalkeeper in Zion Suzuki. They've brought him in from Parma. We're going to talk about that a little later in the show. But David Ornstein saying that regardless of Martinez's potential move to Juventus falling through, Suzuki will be the new number one regardless. So it looks as though Emi Martinez may be leaving Villa, but we just don't know where he's heading to. Right, it's time for this.
Sa carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappé. Allez, Kylian!
Yes, it is Mbappe Watch when we keep an eye on the weird and wonderful world of Kylian Mbappe and what's going on with him and Real Madrid. As we mentioned, Andy, in the La Liga section, Real Madrid haven't started their league campaign yet. They were in friendly action against Schalke. They won rather comfortably, but Kylian Mbappe could have been sent off for an altercation with Nikola Katic, the big defender for Schalke. He only got a yellow card for hitting him on the back of the head. So he managed to survive a sending off in that one. But another striker caught your eye and caught the eye in general, Carlos Espi, the big striker who they've signed from Levante. He got a goal, and he's going to have a really interesting role to play, I think, in this season, isn't he, for Real Madrid?
Yeah, he is. He was huge in keeping Levante up at the end of last season. And to have a big guy off the bench who can provide you with that different option is something they've missed for a couple of years, really, isn't it? Since Joselu. Now, of course, they kind of had that last season with Gonzalo Garcia. But really, to have an opportunity to sell Gonzalo Garcia to Fulham for what's a big amount of money.
Huge amount of money.
Maybe not to a Premier League club. Yeah, he is. An enormous potential. I think it's a great deal for Fulham, by the way. But to be able to sell him and buy a guy for less than half the money who is a proven goal scorer in La Liga and is just going to be delighted to be at Real Madrid and not going to be banging on the manager's door for playing time. It feels like a really good move to me. Really good move to me. And he's got high ceiling as well. I think SB's got a lot of space to develop and become even better than he currently is.
I love the story of his dad, because they spoke to him after the deal was done with Real Madrid, but he'd been absolutely sworn to secrecy, couldn't tell anyone. They wanted to keep it really hush-hush, and he said it was agony, couldn't even tell kind of the extended family about the move. He said it was really difficult keeping it under wraps, but he did a fine job, and SP's got his move, and I think he's going to do really well. I agree with Andy. I think he's going to have a terrific season. But in general, we had a really good chat last week, actually, didn't we, about the kind of balance of this Real Madrid team under Jose Mourinho. What are we thinking? Because to me, there's going to be a lot of pressure on those two central midfield positions. And you could argue that for quite some time, really, since Toni Kroos went, they've just not had that control in midfield. That's why they were in for Rodri, and obviously Rodri's going to Barcelona instead. Somebody like Tchouaméni has the physical gifts to play that deep midfield role. I'm not sure Valverde necessarily has the discipline to do it. Where are they going to get that midfield screen from? Where's that coming from?
It's a really good question. I think a lot really relies on Tchouaméni. But I think you look at the shape of the team, as you say, this 4-2-3-1 that they've been playing mainly through pre-season. And that looks good for Jude Bellingham. I think that's the important thing to underline there for the moment. I think it works for all of the front players, the front four or front 3+1, whichever way you want to look at it. I think that works really, really well for them. So yeah, maybe they'll want another midfielder. I wonder if I can ask you to don your Bundesliga hat, which I know will be within reaching distance.
Yes, it's right here. It's right here. There we go.
Maybe not right this minute, or maybe not this window, but medium term. What are you saying about Angelo Stiller, a player that Real Madrid have been interested in the past? Could he be the option? Because I think it's worth pointing out, particularly in Mourinho teams, the most sexy option isn't always the best option.
I think he could do it tomorrow. I do. I think if they went for him, I think he'd go. I think he's done a wonderful job in terms of maintaining his development, because with a lot of young players, it's kind of, quite ragged, isn't it? They make big leaps and then have a setback, and he's not really done that. He's managed to maintain his level. He's played some really good football under Sebastian Hoeneß. I guess the only question I'd have about Stiller, I think he's brilliant on the ball. I think he's really calm. I think he keeps the team moving. I think he's got better technical quality than people give him credit for. I've seen him score some wonderful goals, actually. That's one thing I'd like to see him do a little bit more, add goals to his game. But my only question about him would not be, could he deal with Real Madrid? I think he probably could. But it's just that link he's had with Sebastian Hoeneß for so long. He played for him at Bayern, played for him at Hoffenheim, he's played for him at Stuttgart. When he doesn't have a coach who absolutely loves him, it's then a question of, can you win them over? So can he win Mourinho over? That would be the big question. But I think he could absolutely handle it. The other one I think they might go for, if they don't go for Stiller, it won't be now, but I wonder in the medium term, do they make a play for Pavlovic at Bayern? Because I think he's exactly, again, not a sexy player, just a guy that seemingly just moves it on. But I like him very much, and I think he's somebody that I could see in a Real Madrid shirt at some stage. Bayern wouldn't want to let that happen, of course. But I'll be really fascinated to see what his medium-term future is. Talking of...
Well, there could be this sort of short-term fix, couldn't there, Kev? I mean, funnily enough, the name that I heard mentioned a little while ago that probably most people would think is a mad idea of a signing for Real Madrid, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. I could see that really working for Real Madrid. He
feels very Mourinho, right?
Yes,
somebody who's experienced, puts his foot in, bit of a leader. But again, that's interesting. We will talk about him when we talk about Marseille. But what I find fascinating about him is that mix he's got between the ball player that he was when he was young and the kind of player that he's developed into, which is somebody who's a lot more defensive-minded. We've got about a minute, Andy. Just give us a word on Endrick, because he's been linked with Villa, he's been linked with other clubs, but there is a general feeling that he might be more likely to stay now.
Yeah, a lot of people saying because he's got the number 9 shirt this season. Well, surprise, he had the number 9 shirt last season for 2 clubs, actually, for Real Madrid and for Lyon. So I think it's far too early in the transfer window. We're only on, 16th of August. We've got more than 2 weeks left to say that he will be staying or he will be going somewhere. There are clubs that are interested. Real Madrid's priorities will change towards the end of the window as well. It won't be a financial issue, I think, that makes him go. And we have to remember that Rodrigo's still injured as well. That's an issue for them. But what's clearly very important is that Endrick just plays this season.
Yeah, they want to maintain his value if they can. Plenty still to come on Trans-Europe Express.
Another 1 or 2 players in Man United in with a shout at the title. What do you think, Gabby?
No, I think Champions League will take a lot out of that squad of players. I look at right backs, Mazraoui, Dalot, not good enough. Centre backs, they need cover there as well. Shesko, listen, he done okay last season, double figures. He's got to be at it this season. They've got a very good squad of players, Jeff, but if they don't get 2 or 3 top players in certain roles, I don't think they can fight for the title. I think top 4 again and get out of the group stage of the Champions League will be a very good season.
Yeah, I mean, they've not been too busy in the transfer market, to say the least. They've brought in Yuri Tielemans, they've brought in Andre Santos. Ben Foster thinks one of those is the signing of the summer.
I still think Yuri Tielemans is the signing so far.
What a bit of business that is.
What a bit of business.
Yeah.
Honestly, I genuinely still think I'm watching a load of transfers happen, and Tottenham spending a lot of money, and Arsenal just spent a lot of money. I still think Yuri Tielemans is the signing of the summer so far for 30 odd million quid, whatever it was. He is a ready-made, good to go starting 11 player, and I think if you can spend £30 million on a ready to go starter, it is worth every single penny.
Yeah. And I agree with him. I think Yuri Tielemans is going to be one of the signings of the summer. But when I look at that midfield, talent is Tielemans and Bruno, Meno and Andre Santos. That's just too thin on the ground, isn't it? They need more than that.
Players get injured as well, and where's their real defensive midfielder?
More green jackets have been lost at the 12th than at the Augusta City Dry Cleaners. Rory McIlroy knows this better than most. But what is Amen Corner and why is it so iconic? The famous sequence has always been there since the Masters began in 1934. It didn't get its name until '58 though, when American sports writer Herbert Warren Wind, on the left, wrote, "At the farthest reach of the Augusta National Course, down in the Amen Corner." He drew inspiration from the 1933 jazz song Shouting in That Amen Corner by the Dorsey Brothers. The reason behind its difficulty is all in the sand and the water. Tournament officials don't even bother to count the balls lost in there each year, such is the sheer number. The 11th, named White Dogwood, is a downhill 520-yard par 4 with a pond to the left of the green and a bunker to the right. Both cause a lot of trouble each year. The 12th, Golden Bell, is perhaps the most famous hole in the world, with danger everywhere. Many aim for the flag, but look, get it even slightly wrong, and you're in the azaleas at the back, or the bunkers at the front, or even worse, Rays Creek. Or you can play it safe and aim for the open green on the left. You chicken. Tiger Woods once said, if you make 4 bogeys from Thursday to Sunday, you're doing well. And the highest ever score on that hole? 13. It's a par 3. Tom Weiskopf in 1980 was the sorry soul. Often the iconic Ben Hogan Bridge is the only thing players enjoy about Golden Bell. Even if you escape there unscathed though, you met with Azalea, the dogleg par 5 13th. It tempts players to go for the green in 2, but cut over those trees on the left at your peril. Every year, it seems, Amen Corner destroys someone's dreams. Rory McIlroy dropped 3 shots through here as his round unravelled in 2011. In 2016, a year after navigating Amen Corner expertly, Jordan Spieth shot a quadruple bogey on the 12th to throw away his green jacket. I mean, it sounds like my game, to be honest. So who'll be the next to be brought to their knees, praying for mercy after Amen Corner?
A very warm welcome to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express. Kevin Hatchard deputising for the great man tonight alongside Andy Brassel. Plenty still to come in the final 2 hours of the show, including an Ask Us Anything section about transfers. We want your input. We did this last week and it was great fun, so we'd like you to get involved again. If you want to ask us about deals that have already happened, or you want to ask us about deals that you think should happen or may happen, then get in touch. You can text us on 81089, or you can get in touch on our various social media channels. We'll do that in the final hour of the show. We're also going to talk about PSG, Liga, Bundesliga, and Andy's been talking to the great and good of Bayer Leverkusen. It's all coming up on Trans-Europe Express. But we will start with Paris Saint-Germain, who've had an intriguing week. They won the UEFA Super Cup once again. They beat Aston Villa in Salzburg in that final. But Andy, they've also been involved in domestic action tonight. They were taking on Lens in the Trophée des Champions, their version of the Community Shield. And how's that gone for them?
Yeah, well, I think they've got a
And as you say those very words, Kev, it's Lens who are lifting the trophy to a very happy Stade Bollaert at the moment. They won 1-0 in the end. They went 1-0 up in the first half by Florian Thauvin. Kylian Antonio, their young defender, was sent off, a little controversially, in my opinion. Before the first half was over, they held out, and Nuno Mendes was sent off near the end for PSG for an elbow. So that sort of pretty much saw off PSG's chances. And a few issues coming out of this game. I mean, notably, of course, there have been so many changes at Lens. You wouldn't expect them to be the second place team again this season. Of course, Dino Topmoller, a coach who you know very well, has become their new coach as well after Pierre Sage went to Crystal Palace. But really, I thought Lens played them very, very well. And funnily enough, I thought PSG looked a little bit flat in midfield. I don't think Vitinha had a great game in the week, and he wasn't great again in this as well. To me, he looks like a player who, after a really below par World Cup by his very high standards, I think he looks like somebody who needs a little bit of time off.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was always going to be the case, wasn't it? Because he's played absolutely relentlessly, hasn't he? João Neves
for
as
2
well.
years.
Yeah. They've been non-stop, so that was always going to happen to some extent. Just a word on, I know we're going to talk about PSG a lot in this section, but just a word on Dino Topmoller. I've got a lot of time for Dino. He's a really personable guy. He's a really smart coach. I speak to coaches, around the league who've worked with him, and some of my co-coms on the Bundesliga have worked with him as well. And the general feeling is very, very smart guy, very good coach. Where he came unstuck at Eintracht Frankfurt was he was a little too easy with the players, easy on the players. He wasn't maybe as disciplined with them as he could be. And I think he maybe will have learned a few lessons from that, because ultimately he gave them far too much latitude. And he ended up with a team by the end that was pretty wild. But he's smart enough to have learnt lessons from that, I think. And I think Lens have pulled off a real coup there by bringing him in. So I wish him all the best, and I wish Lens all the best as well. So I said at the top of the show, didn't I, who can stop PSG? It turned out it was Lens. So we got our answer very, very quickly in the end. Aston Villa couldn't fulfil that role. But actually, Andy, they played really well, and Villa made chances throughout the game. And even though it was PSG who took the trophy, Villa took the plaudits.
Yeah, I very much like Aston Villa as Parisian kryptonite, actually. They're a team that's given them a lot of trouble in recent years, and they've done it very well. They did it with a team that on paper you thought would struggle to make it difficult for PSG. But just because the body's there doesn't necessarily mean the mind and spirit are. And PSG looked at a little bit flat, a little bit off it, I thought, despite the fact they had most of their big guys out there. But I guess this is what's behind the improvement of the squad this season. So they've had a very big week, a very big weekend in terms of transfers. On Friday night, they completed the move to bring Ferran Torres, the winning goal scorer in the World Cup final from Barcelona. And they've completed a move for Mika Hertz as well from Ajax. So they've completely remodelled, probably not remodelled their starting front three, I think it's fair to say. But they've brought in 3 forward players, in Ferran, in Akliouche, and in Mika Hertz. Well, what does this tell us? This tells us a couple of things. Firstly, that the guys who were backing up their big three, they felt weren't giving them enough last season. And Gonzalo Ramos, who they managed to make, in my view, an extraordinary amount of money for when they sold him to Milan, has been one of those. It also suggests that the Bradley Barcola transfer is not that far away.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because you look at somebody like Barcola, and Liverpool have been very, very strongly linked with him. And obviously there's a big gap between the valuations, it seems, at the moment. But there is a guy who we've spoken about glowingly on this show before. French international, has scored for France at the World Cup. But he never really felt like he was a lock for that first 11. And the big reason for that, I guess, is Kvaratskhelia form. Because, again, he scores a brilliant goal against Villa in this Super Cup and kind of drags them through. He didn't play at the World Cup because he plays for Georgia and they didn't make it. But he did play at the Euros, and I thought impressively for them. should he be part of this conversation for the Ballon d'Or? Because Barcola's not been able to get past him, which shows you the quality Kvaratskhelia has. He was involved in 17 Champions League goals in the last season. This is a phenomenal footballer.
Yeah, if not the best in the world, really close. And I think to have that amount of ability on the ball, to bring it to bear usefully for the team, and to do as much as he does without the ball. I mean, what more could you want from a football player, quite frankly? He's got it all. And he's still only 25. And I think in terms of the Ballon d'Or, as you say, there's a chance because none of the players who could have made it theirs did. So if Argentina win the final, Messi wins it. If England win it, then either Kane, probably, or maybe Bellingham win it. If France win it, Mbappe's got a case and maybe a little side chance of Michael Elise. But none of those things came to pass. So eyes go back to the Champions League. And who was the best player in the Champions League last season? Well, you've named him already. Yeah. I think that is the thing with Barcola. When we talk about what the real valuation of Bradley Barcola is, here's a player who's already managed to perform on a top level for a very long time. But the arrival of Kvaratskhelia, he has been the big loser for it. Now, you can't really complain about being bumped from the 11 for a player like that because, as we said, Kvaratskhelia is unique. They call him Kvaradonna for a reason, and not just because he played for Napoli. And the fact is, though, it completely just pulled Barcola out of the first team. Now, Luis Enrique insisted that wouldn't happen. But then, when you actually get it into practice, it's like, you can't really get them in the same team because Barcola does belong on the left. Yeah. He doesn't belong on the right, which for me is why he feels a bit of a weird fit with Liverpool. I'm not saying he wouldn't improve Liverpool, but I think there's another team in red in the Premier League that he would maybe improve a bit more and maybe fill a need that they definitely have a bit more.
Did they have a significant win against Manchester City?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
And I think with Barcola, for a young player to develop in the stratospheric way that he has, and all of a sudden you get a guy to play in his position who's way better than him, that's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think mentally that is a lot to cope with. And the way he responded to be useful off the bench for France at the World Cup, I think, is testament to his mentality.
There are fans of Premier League clubs that think any player is gettable, regardless of where they are or who they play for. But you don't believe that's the case with Kvaratskhelia, do you? Because I'm sure there's Premier League clubs who are looking at him, but PSG will put the shutters down pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's no release clause and he's got 3 years left on his contract. And despite the fact they don't pay the wages that they did in the ages of Neymar and Messi, they will throw everything they've got at him. And PSG don't let players go that they don't want to let go. I don't see it reaching a point where Kvaratskhelia runs his contract down or anything like that. On a sporting level, they're providing almost anything he wants, really. You know, they're allowing him to compete and win the Champions League, and they're allowing him to get enough rest that he's able to perform in these biggest games at his very top level. I think if you look at everything he does on and off the ball, in one way, he would be perfect for the Premier League. And in another way, it would totally break him.
Yeah.
Because he does so much. He can't do that for 60 games a season. He just can't.
No, because he's all action, isn't he? He is so hard-working without the ball, which is why Luis Enrique loves him, of course, because he's exactly what Luis Enrique wants from a player. But I agree with you. I think if he couldn't be carefully managed, I think it'd be very, very difficult for him. So let's say he stays, and I think you're absolutely right. So let's say he stays. Then you have a situation where they've made these changes. I think Hertz is a really interesting signing from Ajax. I think that's really smart. I like Ferran Torres. They're making some really good moves. So then you look at, can they do, to use an American term, a three-peat? Can they win the Champions League 3 seasons in a row? And you'd have to put and you'd have to put them in that position, wouldn't you? Because if they're not, why? Because who's moved beyond them? Because they were able to edge out Arsenal by a very small margin. I understand that. But Arsenal haven't subsumed them. They haven't gone past them. So you'd have to have PSG as Champions League favourites, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think you would. And I think Arsenal did brilliantly to compete with them in the final and take them all the way. But to use that as proof that Arsenal are on the same level, I just don't think they are yet. You know, you're talking about a team that has won the Champions League 2 years in a row in very different ways, which shows their versatility. And they've beefed up that squad. You know, they were able to get over fatigue and injuries by having a squad last season. And now they've had a better summer of rest. Not a perfect summer of rest, of course, because many of those players have been at the World Cup. And they've made their squad better as well. And it is packed with players who will be better for years to come. So they've signed 3 players in their 20s who are improvements on the squad players that they had in the front part of the pitch. They're looking for another goalkeeper. We know that, even though the Zion Suzuki move has fallen through, possibly to the benefit of Aston Villa. So I think the next thing is Luis Enrique needs to get over his aversion to having a reserve right back. He needs to work on that, really. So to me, it feels like they've got absolutely great options. Because they've signed all those forwards, I just wonder if that means Desiree Doué has got a future in midfield, because he can play in the front 3 or he can play in midfield, and he's very good in either. I think that will be part of his development too.
Let's hope he's not your reserve right back, because that's what happened to Warren Zaire-Emery.
Yeah, he might give his brother a call. Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. Maybe.
But
get Geller in.
I don't know. I just think they're in such a good position, and the way that they've strengthened and the sort of players they've bought is entirely in keeping with what they've got. And it was interesting. I think if you go back to last summer, when it's slightly different, of course, when Barcelona signed Marcus Rashford, and Deco was saying the whole way along, our plan in the transfer market, our best plan is to get cover for Rafinha and Lamine Yamal. And it was a good plan, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of people said, well, you lost that end-to-end game against Inter in the Champions League. Buy some defenders. It's like, yeah, but really what we need is backup for our important players so they don't get completely flogged. And that really is what PSG have tried to do this summer. They've tried to protect the most important part of the team by getting quality cover for those players that's going to get better and to give them options. And yeah, I think that is the only weak point that remains. Much as Zaire-Emery does an okay job at right back, and he did a great job actually in the second leg of the Champions League semi-final there.
Really did.
I think it's better for him and better for them if they get someone who can fill in for Hakimi.
Yeah, quite tricky to get somebody to come in and say, so we want you to play right back. Oh, great, okay. Who's my competition? Ashraf Hakimi. But don't worry about that. It'll be absolutely fine.
It's like backing up Harry Kane.
Yeah, exactly. Coming up after the break, we're going to take a look at Liga.
Gabby Bongo joined myself and Drive on Monday. I asked him if he thought Arsenal are to win the league.
Yeah, I do, yeah. I think it's done, mate.
Do you?
Yeah.
We think it's over?
Yeah, it's over, mate.
Really?
Yeah. They're that strong, man. They went and brought in Guimaraes as well, mate. Come on.
Yeah, I hear you, right, and I probably don't want to admit it yet.
Yeah.
We ain't even kicked a ball.
I know,
They're
mate.
the only settled football club in the league.
Exactly.
Right? That's what they've got going for it. What do you make of that? Do you feel like, look, you're an Arsenal fan? They had a great season last season.
Yeah.
Are they're the team to beat?
I think of course they're the Premier League champions, they're the favourites, but I wouldn't sit here today, no chance, and say, it's ours easy. No way whatsoever, because there's so many factors last season. I mean, Arsenal finally got over the line. They played a productive way that maybe for some people, I didn't actually mind it. I quite enjoyed watching it, but there were some people that said that they stunk the place out in terms of the way that they played the game, but they did what they needed to get
Well,
over
they
the
did
line.
stink the place out.
Well, no, you didn't.
Well, they did.
How?
Well, they stunk the Premier League
You
out.
can't stick it out and win it.
No, you can.
No, you can stick it out and finish fourth bottom. Hey, I tell you that. You can do that.
You did stink it out.
No,
Like, you brought the level of fun down in the Premier League.
For a gooner, it wasn't.
Ah, come on. It was turgid, some of the
Listen,
football.
I loved it, right?
Did you really? You'd hate to play in that team.
No, I wouldn't. What, Premier League winners medal? I wouldn't.
You want to see a bit more
no,
exciting
people-
football.
people say this-
like, come on, you've won it now.
All right,
Arteta's won it.
People
Play
say-
a bit more exciting
No,
stuff.
people say that, right? Arsenal still scored 71 goals in the league last year. Only Man City scored more.
We're giving you and three mates the chance to win the ultimate hospitality day out at the 250th Betfred St Ledger at Doncaster. You'll get a table in the Home Straight restaurants, champagne on arrival, 3-course fine dining and afternoon tea. Plus 10 runners-up will win 4-day festival passes. For your chance to win, head to talksportwin.com or text WIN to 83338. That's 83338. Texts and online entries cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or you can call 0343 426 1590. Entries must be in by 4 p.m. on the 17th of August. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a TalkSport promotion. Full T's and C's at talksportwin.com. So for your chance to win, text WIN to 83338 now. So we're going to head to Ligue 1 now, and the headline here, Andy, is will the last person to leave the velodrome turn off the lights? Because there is a major exodus at Marseille. Of course, you know, a lot of the big hitters in terms of the boardroom from last season. You look at Pablo Longoria, the president, you look at Mehdi Benatia, the sporting director, and of course Roberto De Zerbi, the coach, and indeed his successor, Habib Bey. They've all gone. So Bruno Genesio, who's the coach there now, has quite a lot of work to do. It's all a bit of a mess.
Yeah, look, he's a really talented coach as well. I would say he's a potentially better coach for Marseille than either of the previous two guys. But the problem is, what sort of team is he going to have to get out there? Not as good a one as De Zerbi, I think it's fair to say, because we look at some of the players that have gone already this summer. So you look at Mason Greenwood, of course, Geronimo Rui, the goalkeeper, who was really good for them last season, and an important guy in the dressing room as well. They're looking to shift anyone who's got big wages. And this was why Frank McCourt, the owner, was so annoyed and visibly annoyed when Pierre-Emile Højbjerg turned down the move to Newcastle, because, again, they're big wages that he would like to shift, and Højbjerg has made it clear that he's only going to go where he wants on his terms. And so if we're looking at how this clashes with Genesio's job, it's not just the players he'll have available, it's the decisions that he'll have to make on behalf of the board. Now, we heard this week that Højbjerg has been stripped of the captaincy, and Genesio sat there in the press conference and said, well, look, this wasn't my decision, but I'm an employee of the club and I have to do what I'm told. So that's what I've done. So that isn't ideal as well. I think if he wants to share any more of that sort of information, look, I'm not saying he shouldn't be saying that out loud, but he's making a decision and taking a side by saying that out loud, isn't he, Kev?
Yeah, it's a clear distance between him and the owner, because otherwise he would have said, look, this is something as a club that we've decided, and then you would get in step with the owner. But he hasn't done that. He said, look, Guff, nothing to do with me. So he's clearly, but then that's really difficult, isn't it? Because he has to make a bond with the players, his new squad. And if you are seen to be complicit in stripping the captain of the armband just because he wouldn't go along with the transfer that the club wanted, then that's going to annoy a lot of the players. So he's in a difficult position there. I guess, Andy, with Marseille, we trace all of this back, don't we, to that horrific defeat they suffered in Belgium against Club Brugge, because that cost them a place in the Champions League knockout phase. They didn't qualify for the Champions League through Liga at the end of last season. Is that why they are slashing and burning everywhere they can to try and claw some of that money back?
It definitely didn't help. And it was interesting seeing the very frank interview, one of a series of very frank interviews that Mehdi Benatia, the former sporting director, gave earlier this summer. And he was saying how broken De Zerbi was by that. He didn't feel the players were. So that clearly had an effect and clearly hastened his leaving, even though his resignation offer in the immediate aftermath of that was initially turned down. But I think the issue they've got is they went out there and they signed a lot of players either from Premier League clubs or Premier League wages. Now you look at it, Højbjerg, Greenwood, Naya Fager, who had a transfer to Real Sociedad fall through this week. These are all guys earning upwards of 300,000 euros a month, which in the current climate of French football is just not something you can put up with, particularly if you haven't got Champions League money to come this season, Kev. So I think that is a huge problem. I mean, it always to me seemed, and we said it on the show last year, a very flawed transfer policy. You know, there are ways to chase PSG. Bringing forward the players of the future, I think, are it. Now, clearly you need some experience. Do you need some experience who are fringe players at Premier League teams if you're in Liga? I don't think you do.
It's too big a risk, and it didn't work ultimately. And I suppose that's on a knife edge, isn't it? Because if they qualify for the knockout phase of the Champions League and they do progress and they do make a bit of more money and they do make a better fist of it in the league, then maybe we're talking about that transfer policy in a different way. But there's a great irony, isn't there, that they spent all of this money on guys like that, like Højbjerg, but, you know, guys, Premier League fringe players. And Lens, who spent a fraction of that, ended up pushing PSG pretty hard in the league, winning the Coupe de France, and now they've won the Trophée des Champions. So, you know, they're in a position Marseille would love to be in, aren't they?
Yeah, that's it. You're talking about a team with a fraction of the resources, with a novice sporting director, really, in Jean-Louis Leca, who is enormously respected. But, you know, the fact is, he was in his first year as job of not just Lens sporting director, of anyone's sporting director last season. He still managed to get a lot of calls right in the transfer market. Now, you look at some of the players they've had to go out there and replace this summer, Lens. You know, you look at Adrien Thomasson has gone to get more wages at Rennes. You know, not at PSG or Marseille, but at Rennes. We know they can pay quite well, but, you know, it shows you where Lens are, despite getting in the Champions League. Wesley Saïd got a better offer elsewhere. Sangare's obviously moved, you know, and they couldn't hold on to Pierre Sage either, because he wanted to go and coach in the Premier League, and he's been offered a load more money at Crystal Palace. Although I think it's more the sporting side of it that's tempted him. And look at the players that they've managed to rehabilitate. So lower risk, experienced players. So you look at Florian Thauvin, he's been brilliant for them.
Who's the perfect example, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you look at someone like Mathieu Udol, who people fancied as a decent player for a while with potential, but they didn't imagine him going on to that best level. I remember talking to Emmanuel Petit about it on talkSPORT last year, and he was like, he's the best left back in France.
Yeah.
And I think that shows you how they can get players and really get them performing above the levels that a lot of people thought they were capable of.
Now, one player who's been linked with Liverpool, actually, this summer, and a number of other clubs in the transfer market is Matias Fernandes-Pardo. He's asked to leave Lille. But, Andy, Lille are not playing ball.
No, they're not. And Olivier Letang, who used to be the assistant sporting director at PSG and has been president there for a while, has come out with the very emphatic phrase this week of it's not up to him to decide when he leaves the club. It's up to us to decide when he leaves the club. Now, we know that Fernandes-Pardo has wanted to go for a while. I think he thought, from his perspective, if he did his bit and qualified them for the Champions League, then they would let him go. But that hasn't been the case. Obviously, they're going to lose Ayoub Biadi as well, so there's no financial pressure on them because they're going to get in a ton of money for him. And I think there are a couple of other issues there. Firstly, a new coach in Davide Ancelotti, who really needs as good a squad as possible to take into the Champions League and shouldn't really be forced with a rebuild. And the other thing is Olivier Giroud, who has had a few fitness concerns in pre-season, and let's face it, is old now. You know, he's not the starter up front anymore because you've got Fernandez Pardo, who's originally a winger, moved into this more central role because they think it will suit them better in terms of fluidity. And it did work really well in the last couple of months of the season. But from his perspective, I just think surely you're going to have more choice at the end of the season. You go out there, you perform in the Champions League, Lille will be able to sell you for more money, and more clubs will be prepared to really take the plunge for you. Not the ones at the moment who are showing a little bit of interest, and they will get a deal done in the right conditions. And, you know, I don't think he's good enough to go into the Liverpool 11 or to go into the Villa 11 at the moment.
My jaw dropped when he was linked with Liverpool because I don't think he's anywhere near the finished article. I think there's something there, but I don't think he's anywhere near proven enough to be linked with, you know, top Premier League clubs, certainly ones that are in the Champions League. I completely agree with you. I think he needs another season at least at Lille, develop, and then, as you say, you know, then maybe there's a transfer that suits all parties. My star of the week in France is Ciro Immobile. He has announced his retirement. He, of course, was at Paris FC. He's played more than 650 official matches. He scored over 320 goals. Of course, at Lazio it was where he produced probably his best football, a remarkable spell for them down the years. A truly extraordinary striker, Ciro Immobile, hanging up his boots. Andy, who's your star of the week in France?
I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, whereas if I should say Dijon's marketing department or Dijon's tech boffins. I'll let you decide. But
let's go tech boffins.
let's go tech boffins. Because what they've done this year is you'll all be used to not having a coupon pulled out of your season ticket anymore, but it being scanned on the gate. What they've got is they've got a QR scanner in the scarves that they've given their season ticket holders this season. So you might have seen it online when fans have been going to the opening game of the season against Pau, which they've just played. They went up to the turnstiles and just you tap your scarf against the entry point on the turnstile and you get yourself in. What a lovely idea.
Absolutely phenomenal. I tell you who that wouldn't suit, my son, because he would lose it within the opening couple of weeks of the season. He loses hats, he loses gloves, he loses scarves, the lot. So there we go. I won't be getting him involved in that. Coming up after the break on Trans Europe Express, we're going to take a look at Italy.
The way he was bullying Pacho, he was terrorising that defence. Did he miss chances? Yes, he did. Players at 25 will miss chances, never mind 17. He's going to learn a lot. I don't think you can start saying now he's the next striker after Harry Kane, but you know what you need to do now, Jeff? If I'm the FA, I am fast-tracking him because Luxembourg, no, he's not going to choose Luxembourg, but Cameroon, parents are from Cameroon. They'll be looking at him right now saying, we want to get him in the squad for the Cameroon, get him playing a competitive qualifier so that he can't play for England. So maybe fast track him.
He's made it pretty clear that he wants to play for England, hasn't he?
Yeah, but you never know, do you? There's so many players. I was in that position where I could have played for Scotland, Nigeria, through my parents. His parents are Cameroonian. So if I'm the England setup now, he's been called up to under 17s for friendlies this month. Yeah. I'm fast tracking him even to the 21s. Not straight away now, Jeff, but let's see how he does over the next 2 or 3 months. It won't surprise me if he gets fast-tracked to the 21s. And Thomas Tuchel, the FA, are looking at it and saying, okay, Do we get him into the squad? Do we get him a cap in a qualifier, a Nations League game, so that he has to play for England? Because after Harry Kane, how many strikers do we look at and say, whoa, he's the next Harry Kane? I agree. They shouldn't put pressure on him now that he's going to be our next striker after.
Welcome back to Trans-Europe Express. I've just had a note from my wife effectively warning me not to talk down our son on national radio, but he does lose stuff. There's no getting away from it. Sorry, that's just the way it is.
Just take responsibility. Come on.
Exactly. If I have to teach him via tongue lashing on national radio, that's how it has to happen. And Mrs. H has to deal with that as well. Let's move to Italian football then. And the headline for this, Andy, is "The English are coming." And that is very much the case because, of course, John Stones already at Inter. Jed Spence is now an Inter player. He's made the move from Tottenham, and possibly Curtis Jones could be making the move to San Siro from Liverpool. This Jed Spence deal makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because Denzel Dumfries has gone to Real Madrid, so they need a new right back. You look at Jed Spence and what he did for England at the World Cup. I thought he really enhanced his reputation, some excellent performances. We know he's versatile, can play left back, can play right back, but that right back position I think is really going to suit him.
Yeah, it is. But they could really use him occasionally on the left as well, as you say, because they need DeMarco to be available at big time, so not to play him every single game. He's not a 21-year-old anymore either. So I think Spence offers so much from so many perspectives. Played in Italy before, of course. He had those 6 months on loan at Genoa, so he's not completely unfamiliar with the league. So, yeah, it feels as if it'll be a really great move for him and a really great move for them. But it's interesting to see them going for more and more English players. Of course, John Stone's already joining, as you say. Curtis Jones, who they've been interested in for a very long time as well, although I understand that's contingent on them shifting one or two others. At the moment, they can't get rid of Luis Enrique, a wing-back who hasn't really worked out for them, and interestingly has a bit of Premier League interest in himself. Did well at Marseille previously.
So. He was never really a wing-back, was he? He's a winger, really, isn't he? I mean, that always felt like an awkward fit to me.
In the old times, perhaps, but in the modern world, everyone's got to do stuff off the ball.
Yeah,
Kvaratskhelia is making life harder for everyone else.
That's true.
I remember hearing Alfonso Moreira, who's just moved from Lyon to Leverkusen, being asked about that last season because he's got an incredible work rate off the ball, and he was asked about that, and he goes, "Well, I don't want to do it, but the manager makes me."
Even Dembele's doing it nowadays. If Dembele's doing it, you've got to do it.
Yeah.
It's only Mbappe who gets away with it these days. Inter in good shape. Obviously did really well under Christian Kivu. There was a doubt as to whether he was going to be able to step into the shoes of Simone Inzaghi, but he did that incredibly well. You look over the other side of the city and you look at Milan. They've just beaten Manchester United in a pre-season friendly. Ruben Amorim insisted it had no extra importance for him. So slight echoes of Pinocchio there, I would suggest, but there we go. But he's doing what he did not only at Manchester United, but at Sporting. This is what he tends to do. He comes in, he shakes things down, he kicks players out, and you look at some of the players that he's going to dispense with. Guys like Fikayo Tomori, Christopher Nkunku, Fofana is believed to be available. And what we don't know at this stage is what's going to happen with Rafael Leao, because as we've spoken about on the show before, he's been linked with a number of moves and, thought to be available for a certain number. Nobody's biting. And Amorim has made it quite clear that he's unlikely to be in his starting 11.
Yeah, that's right. How did he put it after the United game? He said it will be very difficult for him to get back in the 11. I mean, it's pretty unequivocal.
Yeah, he's making friends again.
Yeah, he is. But I think if you look at those players overall. It's easy to characterise it as a bomb squad and Amorim's having a clear out. Really, he's doing what the club want him to do. The club want to get rid of all those players, and they have been trying to get rid of some of them for quite a while. I mean, and Nkunku, they had sort of buyer's remorse, like probably 6 months in, to be honest. And Santi Jimenez is going to be one of those as well, which again predates Amorim. But I just think Rafael Leao is a really interesting one, because if you can unlock the potential, you're getting yourself a 45 million euro bargain there. And I think he's worth the pop. I think Galatasaray is where he ends up, because we know they're looking for a left-sided player, so they can switch Barış Yilmaz onto the right-hand side. Talking to players who are brilliant off the ball.
Yeah.
Really, this gives Leao a great opportunity. He fits in with what the Super League are doing at the moment, giving players in their mid-20s and late 20s a platform to really flourish in an environment where they know they'll be important. Look at what it did for Mauro Icardi, whose career could have easily gone south after he left PSG and after he fell out of favour there. So I think it would work for them. And I think it could be a great thing for Galatasaray if he were to find even 75% of his proper form.
Is that an easier deal to do than Martinelli, do you think?
Well, it is, because it seems that Martinelli's not really interested. And also, I think with Martinelli, it feels as if his next move will be not financially motivated. Now, I think Leao, you could say he'll do very well financially out of going to the Super League, which he would. But I don't think that's financially motivated either. I just think he's got limited options, because they've offered him everywhere this summer.
Yeah.
And no one in the Premier League has been interested, which really says what's happened to him over this last little while, which is a shame, because we know the quality that he's got in the tank is absolutely incontestable. Now, Martinelli, I think we're looking at making a move for totally sporting reasons. So I think, say, for example, Italy makes a lot of sense for him. If they could make it work money-wise, I think he'd be great for Roma, for example.
Yeah, talking of Roma, we spoke about them and, concerns from Gianpiero Gasperini about their work in the transfer market. They're still trying to get Rodrigo Moura from Porto, who's a very exciting young player, but maybe what they want rather than what they need. I think was the feeling from you last time we spoke about this. But there was at least something good on the pitch, because against Dortmund in a pre-season friendly, much better.
Yeah, and like when they were in the UK, they played a couple of lousy games against Cardiff and Brighton, as we spoke about last week. A just about acceptable one against Newport in between, who are of a certain level. So it was tough, and there was some disquiet in the squad. There was tension because they weren't getting in the players they wanted. But it feels, and it felt from this performance against Dortmund, where they started very well, they got a couple of goals in the opening 10 minutes, two things really. Firstly, they've managed to compartmentalise and say, look, there's so much that we can't affect in the transfer market. And the fact is, if you're a Serie A team nowadays, even if you do have a slightly increased budget through the Champions League, you have to wait for everyone else to do their business first and then see what's left. That's the reality of things.
That's a remarkable change, isn't it, when you think about it? I mean, it is. You look at who, say, some of the big hitters in Italy are up against in the Premier League, and with all respect to some of these clubs, they're incredibly well run. But if you're looking at kind of Brentford and Brighton and even, Bournemouth and Palace and what have you, that's an extraordinary situation to be in, that some of the real big hitters in Italy are fishing in the same pool as those guys.
Yeah, but, this has been the issue for a while. We've seen a talent drain from Italy really over the last 20 years, post-Calciopoli. And I think if you look at the biggest names in European football trying to compete with even lower half Premier League clubs, it's been an issue for a while. I think you go back to N'Golo Kante moving to Leicester. Lyon were interested, Marseille were interested, Leicester came and took him away the season after they almost got relegated. And so this is not a new thing at all.
He did pretty well there, as it turned out. I think it's fair to say.
Not bad.
Wasn't a bad move in the end. My star of the week in Italy, Moise Kean. Shameless because he's one of my favourite players. So I'm just going to give it to him because he scored in Fiorentina's 4-1 win over Benevento. That was the first competitive game for Fabio Grosso. It's a big season, I think, for Fiorentina. Really struggled last term, but they've spent a bit of money, made some interesting transfers. Franco Mastantuono's come in on loan from Real Madrid. He made his debut in that game, came on in the second half. So that's a good start to the season for Fiorentina. A game in the Coppa Italia you'd expect them to win, but they've still got the job done. Andy, who's your star of the week?
Also from the Coppa Italia, I've gone for Akor Adams of Venezia. Now, just signed from Sevilla. Venezia, very ambitious transfer window, but they were 2-0 down at home in the Coppa to Modena. Came back, Akor Adams scored 2, set up the other one. One of his goals was the late winner as well. I think he's going to be a really big hit for them. It's easy to forget that he was really good for Sevilla when he came back from AFCON, scoring some goals that massively contributed to them staying in the division.
Coming up after the break on Trans Europe Express, we're going to take a look at Germany.
talkSPORT's Matt Scott, the guy who just heard doing the news there, talking absolute guff because he rattled some cages this morning on breakfast. He listed off the top 10 biggest clubs in the UK. He said Chelsea cheated their way to success, can't be in the top 10, and Spurs have never won a Champions League. So, and he's put them, he's not even in the top 10. They finished 17th for like 2 seasons in a row. I think you needs to remember that Nottingham Forest ain't been in the Premier League for about 15 seasons. So, anyway, Rory, we've asked you to do your top 10. What did you make just on Matt Scott's Chelsea not being in the top 10?
Yeah, I mean, look, before we get into this, I think it's important that I just establish something very clearly. Matt Scott is my friend.
Yeah.
He's somebody who I rate incredibly highly. I think he's got a huge future, and I like him. It is one of the worst things I've ever heard in my entire life, though. All of that being said, now, I think we can just go for the jugular, be completely honest.
Yeah.
It gave me a migraine.
Yeah.
I feel like listening to that list, I've lost IQ points. Having heard that, I'm now thicker because it is the worst list I've ever heard of anything.
No, it's a bad takes on talkSPORT, and we're all likely to come out with some nonsense every now and then. And
you are. Speak for yourself.
No, you
speak
are
for
as
yourself.
well.
No, speak for yourself.
You know, you can back your argument, but when I heard Bill sent me the list, and I just was just like,
yeah, everything about the list.
Welcome back to Trans Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassel. We're going to switch our attention to my beloved Bundesliga now. We're not too far away from the big kickoff. It's German Cup and Super Cup next weekend, and then the Bundesliga kicks off the following week. And Andy, the headline here, Bayern heat up in pre-season. I was in Germany this weekend in Cologne, and it was 38 degrees. I was at a beach bar with lots of fake sand. It was lovely stuff, but very, very warm for a man of my complexion. And it was very, very warm in Munich as well, as Bayern played RB Leipzig, and it all got a bit too much for Jamal Musiala in the end.
Yeah, that's right. He fainted and fortunately had Ismail Saibari, the new signing from PSV Eindhoven, behind him. He saw what was going on to catch him. But I guess there's been a lot of complaint about hydration breaks. I tend to think that they need to be a common sense thing rather than a prescriptive thing going forward. And I think really it's not the hydration breaks that people have had a problem with, but the rampant commercialisation of them.
Yes.
I've been at games in this early part of the season where the hydration breaks have been booed, which they wouldn't have been in any other year, but they're synonymous with the rampant commercialisation of it in the World Cup. So, I'm sure it won't be an issue once we get to September anyway. But it's clear that we have to have a bit of a think about, there's always this discussion in Seville every year. Sevilla and Betis can't play at home before sort of 9 o'clock at night until we get to September, because otherwise the conditions are just beastly. Just not for the players, but for the spectators as well. So it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. But good result for Bayern, beating Leipzig. And of course, they've still got players coming back. We've only just had Harry Kane and Michael Olise, Dario Upamecano, talking of players that were in the last four of the World Cup, come back to training in the last 2 or 3 days. So whether they'll be ready to start the Super Cup at Dortmund next week, I think there has to be a big question mark over that. They probably shouldn't, I think it's fair to say. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. But Saibari looked the part as well, I thought, when he came on. Assist for him as well. I think he's going to be a huge asset to Bayern this season.
Yeah, goal for Nathaniel Brown as well, who I think is a really smart signing, because the thing about the Bayern fullbacks is that they're so integral to how Kompany wants to play. And they don't even have to be traditional fullbacks. I mean, Brown he's very attacking, but he is a fullback. But you look at what they've done with somebody like Konrad Laimer. I mean, they've perverted him from being a central midfielder. Those fullbacks, whether it's Davies, whether it's Brown, whether it's Laimer, whoever it happens to be, Stanisic is another one, they have to have technical quality. They have to be comfortable with those underlapping runs in the half spaces, because Kompany wants to commit 5 men to the attack, and the fullbacks are usually a big part of that. So I'm fascinated to see how Brown does, because I think what it'll allow them to do is be really careful with Alphonso Davies, because since he signed his new contract, he's had injury after injury after injury, and you just hope he's going to be able to get back to where they need him to be.
He's at a bit of a crossroads, really, isn't he? But
I think so.
They've got to be careful with him. Funnily enough, when you were talking about underlapping fullbacks, and we were talking before about Warren Zaire-Emery and how you kind of think he does a decent enough job at right back, but really he's a midfielder. He'd be a better right back for Bayern than he is for PSG, I reckon.
Yeah, I think he would. I think it's really interesting how that position is changing, because we don't just see it at Bayern. Sometimes we see the way Leipzig use their fullbacks is very interesting sometimes. I think it's a fascinating thing that Kompany's done to tweak that team. But for all the tweaks that he makes, Harry Kane remains a very, very important part of the team and of the squad. Bayern have been very, very sanguine, very calm about the idea that Kane's going to sign a new contract. Technically, he only has a year left on his deal, but I think the feeling in Germany is, Andy, that this is going to get done and Kane's going to extend.
I agree, but on the other hand, they have been leaving nothing to chance and doing a bit of a charm offensive this week, haven't they? Celebrating the anniversary of him signing for the club, doing a number of posts on how he should be the Ballon d'Or, all the rest of it. It's like when you're doing your driving test. You don't just have to look in the mirror; you have to show the instructor you're looking at the mirror, don't you?
Yes. Exactly that. I think he will sign, but it's interesting that it hasn't happened yet. There's been a lot of, well, we'll do it after this, or we'll do it after this, but all parties seem calm at the moment. One deal that's not going to happen is Borussia Dortmund bringing in Said El-Mala from Köln. We talked about this last week and about Dortmund pushing hard for this, but Köln have got a certain number in their head. Dortmund had a certain ceiling in theirs, and they won't go beyond it. But they have done a couple of deals, and I think we can see already, can't we, Andy? Neil Zoller-Buck, who's come in as their new sporting director, he's got a different way of doing things. And you look at the profile of some of the guys they're bringing in, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what's really important, I think, Kev, is they've got a lot of old money off the books this summer. Julian Brandt being part of that, Niklas Süle being part of that as well. And I think the transfer fees are not academic, but I think you need to look at the wages. They're going to have a younger, more dynamic team, which works for Kovac because, he wants these guys to run and run and run. So I think the more you can bring the average age of the team down is better. I think it's interesting to hear about Olabuk because having stepped out of the Almala chase, they've gone out and got Yanis Konstantinelias from PAOK, who's set to sign. Interestingly, there's all sorts going on in Thessaloniki at the moment, where the fans who forced the club to recant on selling him to Stuttgart last summer, he's got a bit further. He's actually got through passport control and on the plane and to the other end this time. They're protesting at the club, so we still expect it to get over the line, but very interesting to see the dynamics of that.
Might be like the Odyssey all over again.
yeah, we're back to the beginning. But Konstantin Elias is not an out-and-out wide player. He's someone who actually looks a little bit more suited to Kovac. So maybe it doesn't completely cut off the idea of, we said if Almala comes, Jadon Sancho definitely won't. Sancho's still an outside possibility for Dortmund to fill the squad, although clearly they'd have to come to some sort of agreement on wages. But you look at Konstantin Elias coming, you look at Joey Veerman is coming as well, a different type of sort of defensive midfield player, because he's one who can score and create as well. And they didn't want someone who just sits there in front of the defence. Yeah. They wanted someone to do a little bit more than that. It was really funny actually hearing yesterday after their win PSV, Fairman speaking to the journalist, and he was asked about the Dortmund move, and he says, well, if they want me, they better get on with it, because I've got an expiring release clause, which is the most Dutch example of frankness that you can ever imagine.
That's what you need to get these things done sometimes. It's got to be done.
Yeah, that's right. But I wanted to ask you, Kev, while we're on Almala, are Köln playing this quite right? I think they should have taken the Dortmund offer. And if you think about earlier in the summer, like before all of this happened, Brighton felt like they had a deal. They certainly had a personal deal with Almala and his family, and they couldn't get an agreement on the fee. Do you think Köln are sort of overplaying their hand a little bit here?
Maybe a little, but I think you have to bear in mind, and you know this as well as I do. Last season, he was really poorly coached. Lukas Kwasniok was an unmitigated disaster, I felt, for Köln last season. And he completely mishandled Almala. And I think actually, with a different coach at the helm, I think we actually might see Almala continue to play well, be a regular starter, and maybe enhance his value. So, you know, it's a gamble. I think they probably expected Dortmund to come back in, and it hasn't happened. So that's probably taken them by surprise. It's also quite complex with him, because it's things like he wants his family, he wants his brother to sign and things like that. Like Köln had to sign his brother, and that was part of the Dortmund talks as well, apparently, that he was going to make a move to Dortmund as well. So yeah, I think it can be a little complex. So yeah, I would like him to play regularly, and I'm hoping that he's gonna do really well, because I think he's played with great talent, but very rough around the edges. So I'm hoping that he can make that leap. I'm going to name a star of the week in Germany just quickly before we wrap up the hour. And staying on the theme of Dortmund getting rid of players with big wages, Niklas Süle, who is officially retired from pro football, but made his debut in the depths of the Kreisliga at the weekend with SV Tiefenbach, and they won 7-2, and Süle was able to score with a trademark header. So lovely to see Süle just playing for the joy of playing rather than the cash, which he has plenty of already. You're listening to Trans-Europe Express.
There's a bit of housery about it, and since Cucurella's gone, I kind of like that housery.
Oh no, I think it's a great quality. I think if you're talking about a footballer, strictly on the pitch here, and you use words like, oh, he's snide, he's snarling, he's aggressive. These are good words to use about a footballer. I want players to be like that. I think Chelsea have been a little bit too nice over recent years. And I think having somebody that is a little bit more on the front foot is a good thing. Enzo Fernandez, we've seen it. Like when he scored that goal against Paris Saint-Germain, he's running off towards their ultras, showing them the Club World Cup badge. Whenever we play Manchester United, he's got Mason Mount round the throat. Like he understands what Mason Mount's relationship with Chelsea fans is, and he leans into that. There are qualities to Enzo Fernandez, no doubt. But I'd 100% want him out of the club and 100% take the money.
Okay, Sean?
I totally agree. I do like him as a footballer, but his heart's not in it. And from the minute he started to tout himself around in terms of I want to play for Madrid, you know what? Guess what? Go. The player I want to see fit is Lavia. Now, when I don't think you remember between towards the end of December 2024, we almost went to the top of the league.
Who would have thought a sporting event's halftime show could have a bigger impact than the game itself? Well, the Super Bowl halftime show does exactly that. In 2024, Usher brought in an audience of 180 million worldwide, the biggest ever in the event's history. But how did singing and dancing get to be the centerpiece of America's biggest sporting event? The first edition of the Super Bowl was held in 1967 when the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Los Angeles. Because of the sheer size of the event, organisers wanted to put on entertainment at halftime for the fans in the stadium. It was a display of marching bands, dancers and pure USA patriotism, and that was the theme that followed for years. In the 1980s, the Walt Disney Company got involved and we started seeing some interesting and questionable displays. But we got our first glimpse of halftime shows to come in '93 when none other than Michael Jackson stunned fans with his 15-minute medley of his own smash hits. When he walked out on stage, he had to wait for the crowd's cheers to die down for about 2 minutes before even starting his first song. Diana Ross, Gloria Estefan, Phil Collins all starred in their own shows, as did Aerosmith, who performed alongside NSYNC. Things got a little bit out of hand in 2004 when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson produced perhaps the most famous or infamous wardrobe malfunction in history. Shows from the likes of Prince, Lady Gaga and Beyoncé are considered by critics as the best. To give you an idea of the scale of things, Rihanna's 2023 halftime show included roughly 800 people. These ranged from backing dancers to stage crew to camera operatives broadcasting to millions around the world. The whole stage for that show was built in roughly 8 minutes and was broken down and cleared away in the same time. The acts perform for free nowadays, even though the experts reckon it costs around $13 million to put on Rihanna's show. Artists know they'll rocket up the charts in the following weeks. Rihanna's average sales improved by 140% in the months following her performance. The Super Bowl halftime show will be a fixture in pop culture for years to come. So the question is, who next?
You're listening to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassel. Of course, as always, we're giving all our love to Danny. And in this final hour of the show, we're going to be taking a look at Bayer Leverkusen. Andy has been talking to the Leverkusen camp. He was at their friendly against Newcastle, so we're going to be digging into that. We're going to look ahead to the playoffs in the Champions League, the Europa League, and indeed the Conference League. We want your input ahead of our transfer Q&A. Do you want to ask us about transfers that have already happened or ones that are still to come? Maybe you can text us on 81089 or get in touch with us on social media. We definitely want your input ahead of that one, and we're going to go around the leagues as well. It's all coming up on Trans-Europe Express. Now, I very rudely, in the last section, did not allow Andy Brastel enough time to name his star of the week in Germany. So, Andy, I've built you the stage. Here it is.
You had a good star of the week. I've no problem with it at all. But while we're on the Dortmund tip, I did want a star of the week, Blumengarten, who you will know at the moment, unless you've been living under a rock, for their song Gut Genug, which is doing really well all over the place. And, I think it means a lot to a lot of people because people are talking about it. Young people are talking about it in terms of encouraging each other to have more self-esteem, which is lovely. Gut genug means good enough in English. And the duo performed it yesterday at half-time in the Dortmund-Roma game in Dortmund shirts because they're from Nord Rhine-Westphalia, which I thought was really nice. It's not often that a club pulls off a PR coup like that and it doesn't just look chintzy, right?
But Dortmund can do that. They've got that kind of cachet that they're able to do that. And of course, German music in general needs as many positives as it can get, I think, sometimes. Although I was listening to their Eurovision entry from a couple of years ago and was very much enjoying that earlier today, which says quite a lot about me, I have to say. But there we go. That won't surprise anybody whatsoever. We're going to stick with Germany because you went to Bayer Leverkusen's friendly against Newcastle. Leverkusen played well, and you were able to speak to the great and good of Die Werk self. Let's hear from the Bayer sporting director, Simon Rolfers, and you asked him how pre-season had gone.
Yeah, for sure. Not so many transfers, not so many outgoing transfers, less income, so more stable. So last year we had really had to rebuild the team. Now it's more, let's say, precise on positions. So the team is developing and also, better connected in a way than last summer. So much more, not relaxed, but more calm.
Do you think you almost had to go through last season with such a turnover of players after Xabi Alonso to get to this point?
Yes, normally we had always, in the years before, always 1-2 players we sold and then a little bit of refreshment. And then, but with this top team and the championship season and the season afterwards, we kept more or less all the players. So it was clear that it comes to a point after 4 or 5 years of building this team, that there is a massive transition, and this transition phase has been last summer. So for sure not always easy in the last season, also during the season, but now I think we are more settled, we have a better fundament of the team, so now it's our own objective to grow step by step, to grow with this team and to create ideally a special team again.
And how important to get the right coach early in the summer in Carles?
Oh, it's always important for sure to plan ahead, to building the squad, to make the signings, etc. It's always good if you have the coach involved and define exactly as well how is your playing style, what is your formation, maybe what positions we need to bring in new players. So for sure, it's important to have this clear as early as possible.
Well, finally, what are the season's aims? I mean, from the last time you were in the Europa League, the competition's changed a lot because the Champions League changed a lot. It's a legitimate objective, isn't it?
Yes, in the league it's a top 4 objective to qualify for Champions League again, and the Europa League for sure. Last time the Europa League we went to the final, unfortunately lost the final, but this gives us the feeling of a final and what impact it can have as well for us as a club and for the fans, for the team. So, no, in the Europa League we go for the maximum.
Yeah, great stuff there, Andy. Great interview with Simon Rolfers, the sporting director there. And it was fascinating, actually, because you're absolutely right. Last season, there was so much turnover in players. Now, a lot of that was enforced, right? Because they lost Jeremy Frimpong, they lost Granit Xhaka, they lost Florian Wirtz. None of those guys they would have wanted to go. They weren't ones that they were trying to get a good price for. They were ones that if they could have held on to them, they would have, because they'd had this remarkable success that nobody saw coming. But that's just not reality. What they went for was they went for trying to spread that money with as many promising players as they could. But they had Erik ten Hag in for the first few weeks of the season before he was jettisoned, quite rightly, because frankly he was just a bit odd in the opening few weeks of the season, made some very odd statements in pre-season once the season got going. They brought in Kesper Hjulman, and I know you were never completely convinced by him and his football and just the team in general under him. I wasn't either. And they missed out on Champions League qualification, which was huge. So it does need a bit more stability, which it seems is what they've gone for. But I want to ask you about Carles Martinez-Nové, because you mentioned him there. He's coming from Toulouse. What can Leverkusen fans expect from him?
Well, I think there's a question over it because he did a great job at Toulouse. They played some enterprising and aggressive football. So I think that sort of halfway house between his Barcelona background and something a bit more practical will stand Leverkusen in good stead. But he is stepping up. There's no doubt about it. And it was a surprise to a lot of people that he got the job. You know, we're looking at other coaches out there as well. Of course, Felipe Luis was one of the candidates who ended up going to Monaco. And so Carles Martinez-Nové was not the candidate that was on a lot of people's shortlists. But they got him early and they were happy with that. And they feel that they'll get something closer to the Xabi Alonso experience this time. And you're right. In terms of what they are as a club, they never changed that. They never started thinking we should be battling Bayern every season, which I think is really important because that basically is the road to madness and financial ruin. So they realise what they are, that they're that club that can be in the Champions League. But this really has been the change for them, that something is expected of them now because they caught the imagination of the world with the way they played under Xabi Alonso, and because they've managed to put themselves in a better financial position and get a bit higher status. Now they're in a position where they feel like they should be qualifying for the Champions League every season. And as Rolfes was saying there, that is the objective. You look at the talent in the squad, and obviously we know Newcastle are in transition at the moment. Maybe they're in the place that Leverkusen were in last season, actually, even though obviously the morphology of the Premier League is quite different. But I think it's an interesting lesson because to me it felt like the big thing yesterday, and Matthias Häsler was trying to give minutes to all his first 11. That was clear. But the gap I felt between the quality of midfield player that Newcastle has and the quality of midfield player that Leverkusen has at the moment is quite pronounced.
Yeah. Leverkusen are a really interesting club, actually, because that Xabi Alonso experience, them winning an unbeaten league and cup double, which is the most remarkable thing I've ever seen in my years covering German football, most unexpected. What it's done, I think, is it's lifted that Leverkusen tag from them. It's lifted that idea that they're a bit of a laughingstock, a bit of a joke. And I think the thing that's changed is not necessarily the expectation to make the top four. I feel like that's been there most of the time I've been covering German football, that they were at least expected to push for it. They might not get there, but there was a long spell when it was them and Gladbach who were kind of, fighting over the scraps and hoping to get that fourth spot. And they had some good runs where they finished second and third, but they were never really challengers to win the league, and they're not now. And I think, you've made that point quite rightly. I think that level of let's get back in the Champions League and have a good swing at a cup is where a lot of clubs find themselves these days, because they look at, a big hitter in their league like Bayern, or maybe it's Marseille and PSG. Maybe it's clubs in England who look at, say, Arsenal and Manchester City and think, right, well, actually, it's got to be Champions League. And if we have a deep run in a cup, then great. And that's kind of fine for Leverkusen. But I think the important thing for them is going to be, can they develop young talent consistently? Because they've shown they can do it.
That's it.
They've shown they can do it, absolutely. They've done it with Wirtz. They, not quite the same, but they developed Frimpong. They took him from being a good player to being a really good player that was a player that Liverpool made the move for, and other clubs, I think, might have made the move for. But I think the other thing they got right that Dortmund haven't got right in recent years, and it alludes to something you spoke about earlier, they got the mid-range stuff right. So Grimaldo was right. Xhaka was right. Guys like that who could... Jonathan Tah was a fixer-upper. You know, he's now gone to Bayern and done very well, but when they first got him, he had massive question marks over him because he was error-prone, he wasn't consistent, and they managed to turn him into, you know, one of the most highly respected defenders in Germany. So I think they're the two strands, I think, that clubs outside of Bayern need to look at. Can you develop young talent? Can you identify it and develop it? But can you get the more experienced guys right? And I think in that season where they won that unbeaten league and cup double, that's absolutely what they did.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Like the cat's out the bag a little bit. So they're trying to step into that place that Dortmund and Monaco aren't really in anymore. You know, the team in Europe where if you want to get to the next level and become a superstar, come here and we will put you on that level. And I suppose Afonso Moreira, who we talked about earlier, is quite a good example of that. So came out the reserve team at Sporting for €2 million. Leon sell him on for 30 after a season where he plays loads more than he's expected to, which is a great deal for them. But it's a good deal for Leverkusen as well, because if they can keep him on this trajectory, they'll sell him for 2 or 3 times that in a couple of years, or maybe even sooner, given how quickly he progressed in the last little while. So can they do that? Because I don't think you can really judge them on not developing yet someone like Elias Ben-Seguir, for example, because the club was so chaotic. Obviously, he had injuries, but the club was so chaotic last season. They were just really trying to get through it. But like you said, they're always expected to challenge for the Champions League. The thing that's changed is post Xabi Alonso is the fact that now, like last season was the first time I can think of where they didn't make the top 4 and it's classed as a failure. That's the difference. And I think the way they played, given the talent they've got in the last couple of months of the season, was a huge part of that and was what really made the position untenable of Kasper Hjulmand in the end. What was interesting to me, though, as one last point, Kev, yesterday, is that Victor Boniface got the winner. Because if we're talking about talent and talent that could be realised, the guy's got all the ability in the world. And he came on and 60 seconds later scored the sort of finish that, you know, just leaves you thinking, why isn't this guy at the top of world football? Well, we know why. Yeah. He's had a lot of bad injuries over recent years. He came to Leverkusen in the first place, having suffered a few serious knee injuries, of course. Still needs to lose a bit of weight, I think it's fair to say. But if
he barely played. He had a year where he barely played.
Yes. And it didn't work out at all at Bremen on loan, which was a lower move than a lot of people expected just because he wasn't available. But if they can get him in a spot, for all the talk of developing other players, that will make an enormous difference to them. If they have a fit Schick and a fit Boniface, like, we'll just be chasing their dust unless you buy him.
Yeah, I would expect them to be pushing very hard indeed for a return to the Champions League. Just one very quick line that is in Bild, which is one of the big publications in Germany. They're linking Niklas Füllkrug, who of course hasn't really worked out as a signing for West Ham. They're linking him with a return to Werder Bremen. I can't imagine Bremen would be able to pay much in terms of a transfer fee. Probably wouldn't be able to pay that much in terms of wages either, but it may be a solution for everyone. Niklas Füllkrug potentially going back to Werder Bremen. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about the qualifiers in the major European tournaments.
What, 1 Europa for one Prem?
Yeah, all right. Yeah,
two.
Obviously.
You're swapping 2, Jay. You are.
Don't know.
Jay, you are.
Maybe 2. Don't know, though. Like, them nights as a final, you know, you've been in cup finals, them nights, you never give them
Jay,
up.
I've been 2. And do you know what? know, I don't want to bring it up, yeah? You cost me one of them.
What do you mean I cost you one of them?
You missed the pen. So
Hold on. Wait, hold on. I didn't see you taking one.
I said to Harry, I'll take one.
No,
You
no,
do
no.
5.
No. Let's have this out. Don't be
Yeah.
blaming me for your Carabao Cup loss, all right? Because I took the first pen and Darren Bent was nowhere to be seen.
And I'm going to tell you the exact truth of what happened.
No,
At
go
the
on.
time, I was a penalty taker. I said to Harry, I'll take 1. He said, no, you take 5. I went,
No, Robbie
sure?
Keane took 5.
No, I was supposed to take 5.
Right.
And he said, you took 1. So it never got to me. I never got to take 1.
Yeah, but the 5th penalty on that night was Robbie Keane.
No, it's me.
Nah, you're lying.
Ask Keno. I don't know if you can remember, but
Nah, you're lying.
I was 5.
You're lying.
I was a penalty taker at the time. So
why don't you take 1?
Because I said to Harry, he said, no, 5.
Nah, I disagree, mate. I think you bottled it.
Hey, listen. Hey, have you seen the pen, Bill?
I did not cost you a Carabao Cup.
You did, mate.
Where were you in the 90 mins?
That could have been 2, mate. That could have been 2 for me. That went no. Cheers, Jake.
That still haunts me. That does.
Does it?
Yeah, it hurts my feelings. I think about it a lot.
Ben Foss had the game of his life, mate.
Yeah.
He won man of the match that game as well.
Mate, it hurts. That game's on as well all the time. They play that game a lot. It's such a bad game.
Do you know what, right? I don't really like giving you credit, but I felt for you in the first one because you were playing well in that period.
Oh, I know.
And he left you out completely.
Yeah,
I felt for you in that.
Yeah, that hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Trans Europe Express. It's time to switch our attention now to the qualifiers in the European tournaments. And Andy, there are some potential belters in the Champions League. Let's start with Fenerbahce against Lyon. Last time we spoke, actually, on last week's show, Lyon looked as though they might be sliding out of the whole thing, but they managed to turn it around in the second leg.
Yeah, they did. They beat Sparta Prague with something to spare in the end. Went for the big front three, with Lois Penda being joined by Malik Fofana and Ernest Nuama, even though the latter two aren't properly fit yet. And it really worked for them. But who was outstanding, actually, Kev, was Tyler Morton. Scored the third goal, hit the crossbar, just had a great game. And he talked at the start of the season about wanting to step up, about adding some numbers to the excellent work that he does. It's funny, when you were talking about Rodri and how that organisational role was something that Real Madrid could really do with, I think if you look at England, amazing a set of players as they have, the one thing they really miss is a guy to control the tempo. Like when you want to speed up the game or when you want to slow it down. I reckon Tyler Morton could do that for them eventually. I really do.
He's come on leaps and bounds, hasn't he, at Lyon?
He has. I mean, really, for a guy who was proven at championship level, but not much above, you know, Paulo Fonseca got him in and said, look, you're my guy that I want to build the team around, really. You're going to regulate the pace of the game for me. And being given that responsibility, he's really stepped up and been able to do that against good teams in big situations. And I think Lyon will struggle to hold him beyond this season.
We've talked a lot recently about Turkish football and the signings that they've made. How big is this for Fenerbahce to turn a playoff place into an actual spot in the Champions League's league phase? Because it's an enormous financial bump, isn't it?
It's huge, but it's huge for Turkish football as well. The first leg at home, I think, is an advantage, so they can try and build up some sort of lead before they go to Lyon for the second game in 10 days' time. Of course, they've signed Romelu Lukaku since we last spoke about it, so they really mean business there. They left out a couple of players yesterday to try and prep themselves for this. I mean, Lyon had the advantage of not playing this weekend because the league season hasn't started yet, and didn't go brilliantly, that Fenerbahce, as we'll talk about in the other leagues section later. But, you know, they've got a squad where they've got plenty of talent at their disposal. But, you know, this is a team that doesn't make the Champions League much. So even though they've got huge financial advantages, over Lyon. There's a lot of pressure, and they've not made it often.
Bode Glimt had two absolute crackers in their playoff. They managed to see off Union Saint-Gilloise. The winner, by the way, in the second leg is brilliant. It's a clearance effectively that hits a player in the face and goes in, which is always great to see. This is the elite competition in European football, and yet you've still got winners going in off people's faces.
Still August, though, isn't it?
Sorry?
Still August, though, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But do you know what? That's a really interesting point, actually. There's no other way around it, right? You have to have these qualifiers before the league phase, which is in September. So there's no other way around it. But it does blow my mind a little bit that team seasons are defined to such a massive extent by games that happen basically in pre-season.
Yeah.
It's slightly unsatisfactory, isn't it? But there's no other way around it.
For that reason, it's one of my favourite parts of the season.
Exactly.
I just love the fact that there's so much riding on it when it's just not ready.
Yeah.
All these teams are totally undercooked, and that I think a lot of the time, because we're not turkeys voting for Christmas, we want to try and convince ourselves that luck doesn't play a part in any of this. Luck plays a part in all of this,
of course,
but it's particularly apparent at this point.
Yes. Exactly. Well, we'd love to say it's all highfalutin analysis, wouldn't we? And it's all able to be explicable down to the nth degree, but that's
I'll tell you what, though, Kev,
the case.
I am really looking forward to the Bode Glimt playoff against NEC Nijmegen. I think that's going to be really interesting because we talked about teams with a lot to lose. Now, that shouldn't be Bode Glimt because we shouldn't really be expecting a Norwegian team to qualify for the Champions League year after year after year. But, of course, they've been such a success story of the last 5 or 6 years. Did great in the competition last season. It's not going to be easy for them against NEC Nijmegen, a team who are an underdog, who are really prepared to attack. That's how they finished third in the Eredivisie last season. Beat Olympiacos in the week in extra time.
That's an amazing result, isn't it? When you think of Olympiacos' recent European, well, not just recent European experience, they're in Europe every season, but they've had success winning that Conference League and they've had some good runs in competitions. For NEC to knock them out, it's really quite phenomenal.
Yeah, and there's experience there in that NEC side. So you have Tyron Cherry, still plays for them. This year they've added Dusan Tadic, who set up one of the goals against Olympiacos and still looks unbelievably fit, by the way. And funnily enough, the winner scored by an old Bundesliga pal of yours, Emre Mor.
Oh, yes.
Almost didn't make it on as sub, actually. So, of course, he was the Danish-born Turkish international wonder kid who went to Dortmund as a teenager, didn't quite work out at a couple of other clubs, has arrived at NEC in his late 20s this summer. And they were trying to bring him on in the first half when they had a forward injured. And he had taped over his earring at the weekend in the Eredivisie, and that was fine. In the game against Telstar, the fourth official said, you can't do that, you have to take it out. And so he couldn't get it out. And he had one of the staff trying to get it out. The coach absolutely losing his mind and saying, if it's not off in the next 20 seconds, I'm going to bring someone else on, basically. And in the end, Moore just grabbed his ear and just pulled it out.
I mean, that's commitment, at least.
But there was blood everywhere.
Yeah, not good.
And then he went on to score the winner with the sore ear.
Yeah, I was waiting for a long, long time at Dortmund for him to blossom, and it never quite happened, unfortunately. He wasn't quite the player we were promised, unfortunately, but it was very early. I mean, it's so early in his career. We expect a lot of these kids when they come through at German clubs. Benfica have really caught your eye. They absolutely battered Hearts, didn't they? And obviously Marco Silva in charge.
Yeah, they did in the first leg. I was at the second leg in Edinburgh on Thursday. Hearts made a really good fist of it. And honestly, they have had an awful draw so far. Of course, they got Sturm Graz in the second qualifying round of the Champions League, and then in the third qualifying round of the Europa League, having dropped down to that, they get Benfica. I hope they have a bit more luck against Rapid Vienna in the Conference League playoff this week, because I think there's a lot to recommend Hearts, and the way they play is really interesting as well. So under new management, of course, and Benfica went there to take it seriously and to win, though. Well supported as they always are all over the world, and again, there's a lot of talent there. And what Marco Silva has got to get used to is there being massive pressure on every game. That's just not the case at Fulham. And I think you have to admire Marco Silva for taking this job, because he could have stayed at Fulham for more money. And if you don't get European football, ultimately no one's going to kick off about it, are they? And at Benfica, every time you drop a point, every time you don't win, it's a massive big deal.
Well, it's really costly, isn't it? When Porto and Sporting are the main opposition and they're not dropping points, if you do, you're in big trouble, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly right. And they dropped points on the first weekend of the league season as well. So it's been tough. But look, I mean, he has got a lot of good quality to call on. He was able to bring Prestiani off the bench in Edinburgh. He was able to bring Rafa Silva off the bench. Dodi Lukebakio has been linked with a move away, scored a great goal in that as well. It'll be a competitive Portuguese league this season. But look, make no mistake about it. With the talent they've got and with the coach they've got, Benfica should be one of the teams who we're looking at to say, yeah, they could really win this Europa League.
In the Conference League, Brighton have got Tromsø in the qualifiers, and 4 Scottish clubs bidding to reach the league phase. Rangers up against Jablonec. Motherwell have got a tough one against Freiburg. Hibs go to Ghent, and as you've mentioned, Hearts are going to face Rapid Vienna. Next couple of weeks are going to be absolutely massive for Scotland in terms of the coefficient going forward.
Absolutely enormous, Kev. I mean, if you can imagine, if they can get 4 teams into the Conference League, I mean, look, I think even if you get 2 in, it's a result. But if you get 4 in, this could be massive for Scottish football in terms of being able to, just to remind people, if you get a point or a win in the Conference League, it counts towards your coefficient just as it does if you were winning in the Europa League or the Champions League. So this is the competition, really, where Scottish Premiership teams should be looking to cash in. All those teams are good enough. Look, I think especially Hibs and Motherwell have really difficult ties.
Yeah.
But Rangers and Hearts, if they can get through, if all 4 get through, even better. You know, it'd be terrific for Scottish football. But it could be a real difference maker. If you look out, the Netherlands have done well out of this, how Greece have done well out of this. It's something to aim for.
Yeah, and of course, Rangers have made a really tough start under Derek McInnes. If they were to go out of Europe entirely before September, then that would be an absolutely huge blow. Last chance, by the way, to get in your entries for Ask Us Anything, whether it's about transfers that have happened or transfers that are about to happen or you think should happen. You can text us on 81089 or get in touch via our social media channels. That's coming up next on Trans Europe Express.
Who's winning the title?
Don't know. I don't know. I want to know what you think of this because I haven't got a clue. I really haven't. I think it's one of the most hardest calls to make we've had in recent years.
The thing is about Manchester City, I wonder without Pep how different it'll be.
Yeah, and if they lose Rodri.
Exactly. You wonder what it's going to be like, but then you never write them off. Arsenal, I think, look like the most complete team.
Gabriel injured though for 5 months.
For 5 months.
And Trossard going out. I don't like the Trossard sale. I really don't. I think he's such a big, influential player for them. I can't believe they've sold him.
I know, but then Guimaraes came on in.
Big signing. Like him a lot.
But then I also look at Manchester United and I wonder, but Chelsea, I think, Jason's right. I don't think we should be sleeping on it at all.
No. We could have a 5 or 6 horse race this season. Yeah. That would be incredible. It really would. I don't want to see somebody run away with it.
Go on then, though. But Jason looked down the camera and delivered that it will be Chelsea.
I know.
So who is it, Ben? Put your neck on the line.
I'm going to say Man United. I do. I think Man United. I think the last season's form has set into motion a style of play and an expectation of what them players have to deliver week in, week out for Manchester United.
But they've got Champions League. They're back in Champions League.
They're back in Champions League.
I think they've got enough.
I think if they can add another one or two, Man United are definitely within a shout. But they need to add one or two big uns. But the problem nowadays is if you're going to add one or two big uns, then it's 200 million quid. Liverpool need a couple big uns.
However, I mean, we do know that Manchester United.
Welcome back to Trans Europe Express. Now it's the Ask Us Anything section. We asked you at the top of the show and have been asking you throughout to send us your questions about transfers that have already happened or transfers that might be about to happen. Let's start with Aston Villa. Jamie is a fan of Unai Emery's side. Says it looks like Emi Martinez's move to Juventus is off. David Ornstein reported earlier on this evening that move is not going to happen. Now, Villa have already signed Zion Suzuki. So a couple of questions here, Andy. Jamie says, if you were Emi Martinez, where would you go next? And how excited should Villa fans be about Zion Suzuki?
Well, I think to start with Zion Suzuki, I'm pretty excited. I thought he was great at the World Cup. He's been improving for Parma over the last year plus. I think we have to temper expectations a little bit because even though he's got the frame and the size to really thrive in the Premier League, and I think the physical part of it is obviously so much part of it, particularly when you consider how important set pieces are, his reactions are second to none. But he's not yet the equal of Emi Martinez, I would say. And I think that has to be borne in mind. Now, we know that Martinez has been looking at the possibility of a move somewhere else for a while now. I think he missed a trick by not going last summer. He could have got himself to the Turkish Super League if he'd wanted to, I think. And I think now there's still the possibility, maybe a bit more of an outside possibility, of Fenerbahce. Now, that would get him into a competitive league, a league where he's got a chance of maybe competing in the Champions League. Let's wait and see. But of course, he could get paid there as well, and they're looking to get rid of Ederson, who's not involved with the first team at the moment. So maybe there's a possibility. But
what's gone wrong there, Andy? Just on Ederson, why is that not quite gone as we thought it might?
Well, I think he's found it quite a frustrating experience, as a lot of players do after coming out of Manchester City. You look at İlkay Gündoğan after he went to Barcelona, and he found the drop in standards, particularly off the pitch, quite difficult to cope with.
He was scathing, wasn't he, that year, actually, about some of the performances? Yeah.
He was Turkish Roy Keane. He really went mad about it. But I think it's been the same for Ederson to a certain extent. But he received a lot of criticism at the end of last season for his not great game that he had when they lost to Galatasaray in the game that sealed the league, really. So that has been tough for him to get past. He's been made to carry the can for that. I think that's harsh because, everyone makes mistakes. He didn't have his greatest game that day, and of course got a red card as well. But they're paying a lot in wages for him. So maybe they've lost the appetite to do that. As far as Emi Martinez goes, I mean, honestly, if there's not the move out there, why would you force your way out of Villa? Like Villa are a competitive club who are back in the Champions League. He's nicely paid. He's important. He's made to feel important. I don't know what the rush is.
Is it too late, though? Is it too late? Because if Suzuki's gone there, I mean, David Ornstein in his social media post earlier this evening was suggesting that regardless of what happens with Martinez, Suzuki is now the number one at Villa. I mean, you can't imagine him being on a bench, can you, at Villa?
Well, it's funny because he would have... That was always the question with this move to PSG when that was going to happen. Would they loan him out to Juventus. That was seeming to be the way it was going to go. Like PSG would sign him, loan him to Juventus for the year, and then bring Suzuki in summer of 2027 to their own first team squad. I think their mind changed midway through that, and they were looking to move on Lucas Chevalier, who obviously they spent a lot of money on last season. But I don't know about you. I'm not convinced Suzuki is quite there yet.
No.
I mean, I think it will take a bit of patience and it will take a bit of time.
I think the thing with him, I know we're dwelling on one question for quite a long time, but I think it bears that.
Yeah.
Suzuki had a lot of errors for Japan earlier in his career, and he got a lot of abuse for it, and very unwarranted. You know, it was well over the top, and you know, his international manager backed him up massively and said he was appalled and ashamed by the kind of abuse that Suzuki had received. I think he's improved since then. I think he's learned a lot from that. He does still make mistakes. And he's a young goalkeeper. He's going to. He's a little bit like Noah Atubolu at Freiburg, who blossomed and did really well, but still makes errors.
And who's likely to be on the move as well.
Yeah. And it's all part, because they've brought in Mia Backhouse, so he'll be on the move. So, yeah, it's all part of a young goalkeeper. But I think if Villa fans are expecting Emi Martinez Mark II, I think they're going to be very disappointed. I think it's going to take him a little while, as you say, to get to that kind of level. I mean, with Martinez, you are talking beyond all the bluster. You're talking about one of the best goalkeepers around. I mean, his international record is exceptional, isn't it, really? Let's move on then. Manchester United fan Andy is asking about a former Manchester United player. Says, guys, could you give us a bit more insight into what's happened with Memphis Depay's contract negotiations at Corinthians? Is it simply that he's asking for too much money, or is there more to it?
Well, so Memphis claims that he was offered a deal and then it was withdrawn. And I don't know if the implication is actually that he's signed something, because he's talking about defending his interests and his rights and stuff. So it feels as if he feels he's been wronged on a legal basis as well. I mean, I think from Corinthians' perspective, I can understand why you'd want to move on. Like, you know, he's been useful to them, and certainly in a PR capacity, and he's really given himself to the game. But how much more has he got left in the tank? I think you have to ask that question. And really, should they be out there spending that amount of money of wages on him? So I can understand if there's a little bit of buyer's remorse. The question is, how far are they actually down the line, and does he have any basis for his legal action, which we're yet to learn?
And talking about veteran forwards and Brazil, Dan has got in touch and said, could Jamie Vardy really be on his way to Sao Paulo? Now, I find Vardy's situation really interesting because he was linked with West Ham not that long ago. When he was at Cremonese, he got 7 goals, I think, in Serie A. Some of those were important goals. Eventually, Cremonese went down, right? But given his age, I thought his performances were pretty good. So he's still a sharp guy who's clearly, having gone to Cremonese, still on the lookout for, you know, travel broadens the mind and all that. Still on the lookout for really interesting experiences.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are 2 issues here, and I think one of them is the fact that what happened last season, where he had like a lot of really useful moments. There's no doubt about it. He didn't have a pre-season. We've seen with Leo Messi before when he went to PSG, the best player in the world can't do without a pre-season. And if he can't do without it, neither can you, basically. Yeah. So I think that really stymied him at the start of the season. And while I can understand him wanting to take his time, make his mind up, work out what's right for his family, especially when he was at one club for so long, to have that bit of freedom must be quite nice. But surely he's going to go into this season not being entirely fit anyway. Of course, it's slightly different in Brazil because the timetable's different in terms of the league, and maybe we're talking about getting right for the back end of some of the other games. But look, I think it's a lovely idea. I love it, and as it's not my club, I'm totally invested in it.
Yes,
but I want it to be, look, I love Jamie Vardy and I want it to be a good experience for him. And I just think, like, if you've not had team training and we're like in the 3rd week of August now, that does make it very, very complicated in a season that you're going to turn 40 in.
Yeah, you don't want it to be one of those things where you look at the Wikipedia page and it's Sao Paulo, played 7, scored 1. Then he goes to Genk, played 12, scored 2. You don't really want it to end that way. Andre got in touch, a Milan fan, and talked about Rafa Leao. We've kind of covered it, Andre. You've asked, yes, he's been offered to Premier League clubs. There haven't really been any takers. Where would you go next? We did kind of cover it earlier in the show, and he was, quite glowing about the idea of going to Galatasaray, and I think I agree with him. I think that could be the reset that Rafael Leao needs. So we'll move on to Jay, who's a Spurs fan. Says, with Rodri now seemingly on his way to Barcelona, and talkSPORT understands that Barcelona and Manchester City have agreed a deal for that transfer, how could it impact Real Madrid's plans in the transfer market? Now, we talked about Tchouameni, we talked about Valverde. They've got some midfielders in there. The one player we didn't talk about earlier that I did want to ask you about was Arda Güler, because we don't really know yet, do we, where his best position is? Because Xabi Alonso moved him into the centre as this kind of, player that could kind of move the ball around and get Real Madrid ticking. But we know him further forward, scoring brilliant goals or coming up with amazing assists or what have you. Where does he fit in all of this under Jose Mourinho?
I think that's a really good question. But what we did see is that he can really work in the Mourinho side in that friendly against Schalke today. I thought he's really good in the part that he played in that. Him and Mbappe, I thought, with Mbappe surviving that near miss of being sent off, did really well in that game, albeit against opposition that are rebuilding. I think it's fair to say at the moment, and are a week further off starting domestic action. But look, I think what is clear is that Brahim Diaz is the one that's going to be squeezed out there. I don't think it's Arda Güler, because Arda Güler has got the versatility, the quality, and the temperament to be able to cope with being a Mourinho player. So I think that is clear, that he's going to continue to be a big player for them, just like he was a huge player for Xabi Alonso when we're going back to the start of last season. I do think there is a question mark over an extra holder you could get in. And for me, all the answers are not 100 million players.
Yeah,
for me. So we talked about Højbjerg. I think someone like Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa would be great for them. Really.
He was so good for Napoli.
Year left on his contract.
Yeah,
I know he's had an injury. Are you telling me he wouldn't be great for Real Madrid? I think he'd be ideal for a Mourinho Real Madrid.
Yeah, it needs a specialist in there that has a very specific set of skills there. I'm not talking about Liam Neeson in Taken, of course. Coming up after the break. Thanks, by the way, to everyone who got in touch. Really enjoying this section, this Ask Us Anything section. So really enjoyed that, and keep getting in touch with those. We'll take that forward, I think, into the next few weeks. But after the break, we're going to go around the leagues. Honestly, I've seen a few messages today and you go, yeah, that O'Hara and Gabby, they're talking rubbish, need to get rid of them. Rory talks sense. I'm like, having a laugh.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah. That was me saying that. Yeah. I've been commenting. I've been, God, those two have been terrible. Look at those two giggling away.
Brennan Johnson, listen, fair play to him. He had a little bite. And that's fine. Got no problem with a player having a bite back, because it's all part and parcel of working in the media, being a footballer. You're going to take criticism. He obviously didn't like the fact that we said it was crap for crap. What he didn't realise, and I'm sure...
That's weird of him, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously he's not going to like that. But, it was only a bit of a laugh. But, I get it. People are going to... You get the ump with things. I've been called crap plenty of times. Get called crap every single day of the week. Don't take it personal. All right? It is what it is.
He has been crap.
Yeah, I think that's
like.
the point.
I'm sorry, but you know, like I'm not saying he's a bad player. Anyone who plays Premier League football, anyone who does what he's done, fair play, brilliant. Last season, Brennan Johnson was crap.
Yeah,
he would be the first to admit it, and hopefully he goes to Everton and he does all right. And Dwight McNeil goes the other way. I like Dwight McNeil. I think he's a good player. His stats is what we were talking about on the show, me and Gabby, were crap.
Yeah.
So there's no apology needed. I know Gabby bottled it like he always. We've nearly reached the end of Trans-Europe Express. 3 hours have flown by, as they always do. We're going to end by going around the leagues. And Andy, we've talked about some of the big Turkish clubs and some of the transfer business that they've already done. But of course, there's action on the pitch as well as off it.
Yeah, and I guess what's remarkable about the opening to the Super League season is neither Galatasaray or Fenerbahce won. Now, I think Galatasaray on the opening night on Friday night was really surprising. Playing at home to Çorum, really interesting club who've come up a long way in a short time, and really ambitious going into this season. Victor Osimhen, of course, gave Galatasaray the league, but then Andros Kiziridis, who we know has been doing a great job at Hearts and left just a week and a half ago, goes in for his debut, scores an absolute banger to get them level in the game. What a first game to play, and what a goal to get. Smashed it in the top corner from 25 yards. And Çorum even take the lead. But then Kiziridis is sent off and they end up hanging on a little bit. Osimhen equalises in the 90th minute. And Çorum have a couple of huge chances to win the game even after that with 10 men, which is pretty amazing. So very eventful start to him and his Super League career, Alexandros Kiziridis. And then you have Fenerbahce going to Gençlerbirliği. You expect them to get an easy win, even with the few changes. The fact that they're giving a breather to Greenwood, to Kante. But despite taking the lead early on in that, they managed to lose that game. And as we know, as we always say about Portugal, in a league where really it's only one of two or three teams that ever win it, and that's traditionally been the case for decades, losing points is really tough to get over, and every time you do, it's treated like an absolute disaster. We know that Fenerbahce have been out there trying to make it happen in the transfer market this summer, and they've got a lot of big players in. You know, it's a quality squad with a lot of experience as well. But they've not won the Turkish Super League. We can talk about Europe all we like. They've not won the Turkish Super League for over a decade. And that really needs to change this year.
One of those seasons they had 99 points, didn't they? And still didn't manage to win the league, which shows you
they did.
exactly.
And the coach they sacked for that, Ismail Kartal, has come back. He's back in charge now, having replaced Domenico Tedesco. But you must be losing a late game like that on the first day and thinking, can we still get to 99?
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, actually, because, you know, Trabzonspor brought in Salah, you know, that's a huge move, but they've got other quality players. Besiktas,
yeah, we should say they drew at Kazim Pasha on the opening game. They're 1-0 down. Salah came on a sub after about an hour, obviously very warmly received in the middle of Istanbul where Kazim Pasha play. Came very close to a winner, but didn't quite get there. But he was already in the spirit of it, playing well, wearing the number 10 shirt, arguing with the refs.
Lovely stuff.
Turkish football culture, isn't it?
Yes, exactly that. He's embraced it already.
Yes.
Turkey, you can't afford to drop points. That's definitely the case in Portugal as well.
Yeah, it is. And we've still got Benfica to play. They're playing tomorrow night against Casa Pia at home, as befits their European campaign at the moment, of course. But nice and easy for Porto. Kept another clean sheet, won 2-0 at Rio Ave on the second day. So 2 games, 2-0 wins, all very Farioli-esque. And they played with a little bit more assurance than they did last week against Alverca, where their goalkeeper, Diogo Costa, who's been linked with a few moves away this summer, he had to have a really good game in that first game to keep them in front. But Sporting were the one to watch. Of course, we know they've had a massive makeover this summer. But all respect to Rui Borges, because they have been really good to watch, despite losing a glut of key players. We know Pedro Gonçalves is off as well. Trincao is gone. Diamande has gone to Nottingham Forest. But another Gonçalves, Flavio, the young man, got his first goal for the club or for the first team to put them in front at the beginning. But they were 3-0 up at half-time against Guimarães, and they got pulled back to 3-2. Now, having lost a 2-0 lead last week, for Malacao, that like everyone was a little bit twitchy, and they got booed a little bit at the end despite getting their first 3 points of the season.
Not a single clean sheet in the Netherlands, I noticed, in the Eredivisie. What news from there, Andy?
Well, talking of chucking 2-goal leads, both Ajax and Feyenoord managed to do it this weekend against Heerenveen and Go Ahead Eagles, respectively, in today's games. Of course, Ajax moving on from Mika Gertz, and they did a lot of social media posts on as if it was, I don't know, it was like Jude Bellingham leaving Birmingham or something like that. They're really excited about it. But obviously he's brought them in a lot of money. And if PSG had not been interested in him, I really like Mika Hertz, but they would have been looking at a much lower fee.
Yeah.
So
it's a bit weird for a club like Ajax to be behaving like that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, obviously he was like a lot of Belgians in the past. You think of someone like Jan Vertonghen, who made his Ajax debut when he was 16. You know, there's a tradition of Belgians coming through the ranks there, and of course he wasn't strictly an academy player. Hertz, it was a little bit different, even if he started out in the B team. So I think they appreciated how much joy he gave them last season when there was no joy in last season. So and he made them a ton of money as well. We should say as well that PSV won 2-1 at Excelsior, their first win of the season, and NEC Nijmegen, despite having that epic game against Olympiacos and go to extra time in the week, the old boys were fine, and they won 4-1 at Willem II.
Just a word on Liam Van Nistelrooy, by the way, Ruud's son, scored a goal to help PSV's under-19s get through to the final of the tournament they were in, and my God, he moves like his dad. It's absolutely extraordinary.
He really does, doesn't he?
Yeah, if you get a chance to see the clip of the goal, it might as well be Ruud. It was really extraordinary.
While we're on deserving Nepo babies, I think we should say Ruben van Bommel, back from that ACL. He scored his first goal since coming back for PSV against Excelsior yesterday.
Good to hear as well. Good to hear. Good player who's been derailed by injury. You want to talk about Sweden as well?
Yeah, because we started talking about Robbie Ewer, but right at the start. And he moved on, of course, and Sirius played their first game without him. They lost their first game without him. The first game that they've lost all season, which is pretty amazing. It was, though, not really due to losing him. They lost 4-3 at the previous champions, Mjällby, presumably the outgoing champions. So they still scored 3. I guess he must do a lot of pressing from the front, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as we know, he's learnt a few tricks already from his very short time in La Liga. Let's give you an update on our poll, shall we? We asked you right at the top of the show, which team did Cristiano Ronaldo play his best football for? Only 18% of you said Manchester United, 1% said Portugal, 1% said other, 80% of you said Real Madrid. You felt that Cristiano Ronaldo's best football was for Real Madrid. Which way would you have gone, Andy, just quickly?
Yeah, I'm with the punters. 100%. You're right, people. You're right.
Andy Brassel, never say he is not a man of the people. Andy, it has been a joy and an education once again. 3 hours
Always
have flown by. For this week, at least, our odyssey has come to an end. Thank you to each and every one of you who have tuned in, whether it's via radio, via the app, or via other means. It is always a pleasure to be joined by you and have you as part of our club. Coming up after us, it's an episode of the Best of talkSPORT.